Hey everyone, welcome back to Infinite Podcast with your hosts tearing it up as always. I'm here with Simon, who's about to get an earful about quinoa. So, ancient Incans called it the mother of all grains, right? Well, they weren't kidding. This stuff packs a punch nutritionally. But Simon, do you think those Incans saw quinoa taking over the global market in their wildest dreams?
Haha, Joe, imagining Incans forecasting the stock market is wild. Doubt they had Wall Street in mind, but hey, who knew those tiny seeds would turn into gold for health nuts everywhere? Quinoa's blowing up like my cousin Jerry's failed baking experiments. Never predictable, but oddly fascinating.
You know, this reminds me of the time I tried to grow my own vegetables. My garden was more like a tiny patch in the backyard, and somehow, miracle of all, my quinoa plants thrived. They were surrounded by sad-looking carrots and some sorry excuses for tomatoes. Taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes the underdog, or underseed in this case, surprises you. Just like how quinoa shot from obscurity to superstardom on dinner plates worldwide.
Underdog stories are the best, right? It's like my quinoa was showing those veggies who's boss. Never underestimate the little guys.
Sure, underdog stories are great, but here's a twist. What if the so-called little guys start taking over? Quinoa did just that. It went from food staple to fancy superfood, and now we're dealing with overfarmed fields and sky-high prices. Kinda makes you wonder if it's worth hyping up these ancient grains until they lose their charm and affordability for the people who've relied on them for centuries.
Remember when quinoa was that quiet kid in class, and now it's like the prom king of grains? Next thing you know, it'll be wearing tiny sunglasses, rolling in a Tesla asking for premium prices. The locals who used to eat it must be scratching their heads. That's our everyday mush. Why is it dressed up like a Hollywood starlet?
That's exactly it, Simon. And consider this, quinoa isn't even a grain. It's a seed from the Chenopodium quinoa plant, a relative of spinach and beets. The Incas actually cultivated it in harsh climates at high altitudes, nowhere near where you'd find your typical crops. Plus, quinoa is a complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, rare for plant-based foods. It was the perfect staple for Incan warriors back in the day. Now tell me that's not prom king material.
A seed that struts like a grain and packs a protein punch? Could quinoa be the next big thing in plant-based diets, elbowing out kale for the top spot?
Kale might want to leave the competition behind, but quinoa's like, I'm not just a side dish, I'm the whole meal. Plus, it's gluten-free. Kale's shaking in its boots.
But let's be real. Can quinoa truly dethrone kale? Quinoa's got the versatility of a Swiss Army knife, but remember when people thought disco would last forever? Trends come and go. I'm not convinced quinoa's reign will stick around, especially with those prices. Can it really keep its crown, or will it be just another one-hit wonder like my attempt at a singing career?
Well, Simon, while disco had its time and your singing career was memorable, let's say, quinoa's been around for thousands of years. It's not just a fad, it has staying power thanks to its nutritional profile. But the real challenge? Keeping it sustainable and accessible. If we can't do that, then yeah, quinoa might drop off the charts faster than a one-hit wonder. Let's hope not, though, because who else is going to accompany my roasted veggies with such grace?
For sure, Joe. And it's key to remember the balance, right? But hey, going off that, how do you think we can keep quinoa both sustainable and accessible, avoiding that whole flash-in-the-pan situation?
So a while back, I visited this small farm that was doing things right. They were growing quinoa alongside their other crops, rotating the fields to keep the soil healthy. No monocropping in sight. The farmer told me his secret wasn't any cutting-edge tech or fancy method, but an old philosophy, everything in moderation. He knew that overdoing it, racing for the quick profit, would just ruin what made quinoa special, and he wasn't about to let that happen on his watch. It's simple wisdom, but it's gold, just like those grains.
Love that, Joe. Everything in moderation isn't just farming advice. It's like a life motto. If we don't go overboard, both quinoa and the planet win. Keep it simple. Keep it sustainable. That's gold indeed.
Absolutely, Simon. That moderation thing ties back to consumption, too. If we all manage our demand, it doesn't snowball into this uncontrollable craze. That's the key to not running these ancient crops into the ground, literally. We keep that balance. Quinoa's reign stays legit without turning our backs on those who've been eating it since way before it was cool. We protect heritage and health. It's like hitting two birds with one superfood seed.
Sure, Joe, but aren't we glorifying just another food trend? Everyone's hung up on superfoods. One day it's acai, then it's chia seeds, now quinoa. What if we just chilled out and enjoyed a variety of foods? Imagine that. It might not sound as sexy as mother of all grains, but isn't balance the real superpower here? Diversity on our plates, that's the spicy life recipe I'm looking for.
Hey listeners, just tuning in, we're diving into the fascinating world of quinoa, or as the Incas called it, the mother of all grains. Ironically, though, it's not a grain, but a powerful little seed that's taken the health world by storm. We've covered its sustainability, nutritional benefits, and whether it's just another passing fad in our ever-evolving plate trends. As fun as it is to crown these food kings, what we're really advocating here is balance and moderation. Whether it be farming or feasting, keep your plates diverse and you can't go wrong.
Absolutely, balance is key. But quick question for all our listeners out there. If you had to pick between being Team Quinoa or Team Everything in Moderation, which side are you on?
Team quinoa? Not so fast. I'm going with Team Everything in Moderation, and here's why. While quinoa is a nutritional powerhouse, relying too heavily on any single food can lead to an imbalance, not just in our diets, but also in the agricultural economies. Overhyping one crop risks destabilizing local markets where it's a staple, plus it can cause environmental stress. Diversity in agriculture, like in our diets, ensures better resilience and health across the board. So, let's not put all our eggs or seeds in one basket.
You've got a point there, Joe. Too much of one thing never ends well. Keep those plates colorful, folks. Now I'm curious, how will quinoa's story unfold? Will it keep its mother of all grains title, or quietly step down from the throne? What do you think is next for this ancient seed?
Considering how we've embraced quinoa, it's a bit like barley back in Mesopotamia. And speaking of transitions, did you know barley went from superfood status to becoming the foundation for one of the oldest recipes known, beer? Our love for grains seems to follow us through history, just changing shapes and forms. It's fascinating to think about barley's health benefits as recognized by ancient civilizations versus what modern science has to say now. But no matter how you brew it, the social significance of beer as a cultural staple definitely has deep roots, doesn't it?
Ancient Mesopotamians weren't just chugging beer for the fun of it. They actually praised barley's health perks. I mean, they had writings on clay tablets talking about its benefits. Cut to now, and scientists back up some of those claims, saying barley can be good for your heart and digestion because of that fiber goodness. Beer was more than a drink for them. It was a social connector, part of their religion, even used as currency. Today, well, it's still bringing folks together, whether at pubs or backyard barbecues. So cheers to barley, feeding us, paying us, and getting us tipsy since 3400 BC.
Totally, Simon. Isn't it mind-blowing that something they sipped on for health in 3400 BC is still a favorite at happy hour? The fiber and nutrients in barley were no joke to the ancient Mesopotamians, who were pretty spot on with their dietary wisdom. Fast forward to our time, and while we're not exactly using beer as currency, unless you count buying your buddies round, its role in social bonding hasn't waned. It's sort of poetic if you think about it. A humble grain connecting people across millennia through pints and cheers. Beer has indeed stood the test of time, fermented from ancient nourishment to today's craft brew culture. Raise a glass to tradition that tastes this good.
You're right, Joe, it's wild. A pint's like a time machine. Here's to barley, the ancient social glue still holding our get-togethers together. Cheers to history in every sip.
So Simon, thinking about barley's journey from ancient superfood to beer essential, what do you reckon has had the bigger impact on society? Its nutritional value or its role in social rituals?
Got to side with the social rituals on this one, Joe. Sure, barley's packed with nutrients, but its role in beer? That changed history. Beer's been a deal maker, a peacekeeper. It's built and bonded communities. The nutritional side is great and all, but let's be real. People don't gather to discuss fiber content. It's that communal clink of glasses we're after. Barley's brew magic is the true catalyst for cultural change.
Simon, you've hit the nail on the head with the social aspect. And diving a bit deeper into barley's beverage biography, Mesopotamians weren't alone in their brew love. Sumerians had a goddess dedicated to beer, Ninkasi, and they'd actually pray to her for their daily brew. The Egyptians followed suit. Workers who built the pyramids were paid in beer rations. Talk about liquid gold. Nowadays, barley malt remains the soul of most beers. But let's not overlook recent craft beer revolutions. They've created entire communities, economies, even tourism around unique local brews. Barley has morphed from ancient health staple to artisanal expression, showing just how much impact one little grain can have across the ages.
Barley to beer. It's not just a drink, but a cultural heavyweight. From divine offerings to craft beer geeks, barley's legacy is brewing strong.
Spot on, Simon. And let's not forget how beer brewing pushed technological advancements. Those Mesopotamians were pioneers, developing strains of barley that thrived in their climate, early agronomy at its finest. Beer essentially spurred innovation. Bringing it back to modern times, craft brewers are like the alchemists of our era, tweaking barley malts for that perfect profile. They're keeping the tradition alive, pouring passion and precision into each pint. Barley might just be the most influential grain in human culture, from sustaining ancient empires to inspiring today's craft beer phenomena.
Really, Joe? Most influential grain? What about wheat or rice, feeding billions daily? Craft beer is cool and all, but let's remember the real MVPs of the grain world. Sure, brewing's neat, but without these staples, civilizations might have crumbled before they could even think about happy hour.
Fair point about wheat and rice, Simon. They are absolutely crucial in the global diet. But let's flip this. Could it be that barley's influence in cultural and social aspects, rather than sheer calorie count, gives it a unique edge over other grains throughout history?
Unique edge? I'd argue it's not about one grain being more important, but how each shaped our world uniquely. Wheat and rice fed civilizations, true powerhouses there. Barley's role in social culture is rich, but you can't toast on an empty stomach. Each grain carved its own path in human history, with none claiming the throne alone. Influence isn't just a one-grain show, it's a crop collaboration, if you ask me.
I hear you, Simon. Maybe calling barley the most influential is stretching it a bit. What I'm driving at is this. While wheat and rice have indeed been the heavyweight champions of sustenance, barley's role has always been more nuanced. It brought people together in ancient taverns and today's tap rooms. Each grain played its part on history's stage, wheat and rice as the leads in the drama of human survival, with barley starring in the social spin-off series. Together, these grains have shaped both our plates and our rituals, each vital to the complex saga of civilization.
It's the grain ensemble cast, Joe, wheat and rice as the staple stars, barley as the socialite, all essential for the sweep of history we're chowing down on.
A grain ensemble cast, huh? It's like each one has its unique role in the ecosystem of human development. You've got your heavy hitters like rice and wheat putting the carb fuel in the tank, and barley's there adding character to our downtime. It's classic human innovation. We don't just settle for survival, we spice it up with a little bit of fun. That's society, always looking for balance between what we need and what brings us together.
I'd say that's the beauty of it, Joe. We're creatures of necessity and joy. Barley reminds us that while we farm the fields for food, we also brew to bond. Maybe that's the secret ingredient to civilization, a hearty helping of grain with a spirited splash of socializing. What other ancient practices do you think we've spun into modern marvels?
Speaking of brewing to bond, Simon, that actually brings us to another tasty tidbit from history: honey and mead. Now there's a duo that's buzzed through time. In Norse mythology, mead was literally the drink of poets, believed to grant wisdom and even immortality. Suppose the Vikings had it figured out. If you can't live forever, at least write something that will. And today, honey's not just for tea when you're sick. It's in all kinds of health crazes, some believing it's just shy of liquid gold.
Wisdom, immortality, and a killer sweet tooth, Joe. Honey's been working some serious overtime. Though I gotta say, if all it took was a swig of mead to become wise, I'd be setting up my own hive right about now. Today's health scene's got honey as the star. Antioxidants, antibacterial properties. It's like the Swiss Army knife of the pantry. But let's not forget those hilarious myths. Eat this golden goo and live forever. Yeah, sure. And I'm the lost king of Atlantis.
Absolutely, Simon. Immortal or not, who can resist those stories? But let's buzz into that hive of yours for a sec. If you could craft your own modern myth around honey today, what kind of powers would you give it in the mythos of Simon's super honey?
Ha! If I were the myth maker, Joe, my super honey would be like the ultimate life hack. 1 spoonful? You're fluent in every language, including dolphin. 2 spoons, you can moonwalk on water. And if someone digs into a third, bam, they instantly know where their lost socks have been hiding all these years. The catch is, the jar reseals itself randomly, so good luck getting to that third spoon.
Simon, your super honey is a buzzworthy legend in the making, my man. But back to real talk about honey and immortality. Sure, these myths might sound sticky sweet and over the top, but isn't it interesting how ancient folks always associated food with magical properties? From mead for wisdom to ambrosia for the Greek gods, they really believed you are what you eat, or drink in this case. And funny enough, while we might chuckle at those old tales, we aren't too different today. Slathering honey on everything from toast to face masks, all in hopes of some natural magic. Culitinks to the past, sure, but clothed in modern wellness vibes. The quest continues, a bit less mythical, but definitely delicious.
Well, Joe, not everyone's sold on this honey as a miracle trend. To some skeptics, it's equally as mythical as the old tales of mead and immortality. They see honey being lumped with so-called superfoods without solid proof, overblown to health food stardom when it's just a sweetener, albeit a natural and tasty one. The backlash comes from our tendency to glorify the natural while demonizing anything processed, even though balance is key in any diet. Maybe those ancient myths are still shaping how we view foods like honey today, for better or worse.
Well, Simon, diving deeper into that honeypot of skepticism, you're right that not everybody is on board the beehive bandwagon. Looking at it through the glasses of science, the benefits of honey can be hyped up. Sure, it has perks, natural antioxidants, wound healing properties and such, but slapping superfood on it might be stretching it like an overused elastic. The point I'm making is, while those ancient myths don't hold up under the microscope, honey's stuck around in our diets for good reasons. Yet, key is moderation and not expecting miraculous health boons just from a daily drizzle of honey. That's leaving too much to bee leaf. See? Comedy gold right here, folks. But honestly, whether it's mead or millennia-old myths, we love believing in something a bit magical about our food. It makes the mundane taste that bit sweeter.
You're spot on, Joe. Moderation is king. So with all this talk about honey and health, what's your take? Are you a moderate drizzler, or do you lean towards the honey as liquid gold club?
Simon, between you and me, I'm more of a moderate drizzler, though I won't pass up on a good honey-roasted peanut. But this liquid gold talk, you have to wade through a river of hype to get to the truth. Everyone's looking for that magic bullet in health, and honey is just today's poster child. The way I see it, there's no denying honey's got benefits, but so does good old broccoli. Not as glamorous, right? I'm all for enjoying honey. Just maybe don't expect to live forever or suddenly get ripped because you swapped your sugar for bees' hard work. Keep it real. Use honey where it shines. Make some mead if you're feeling historical. But let's not forget to give credit to the rest of the nutrition lineup out there.
Sure thing, Joe. Well, it looks like honey's place at our table is pretty secure, magical or not. And hey, even if it doesn't make us immortal, mead's comeback is sweet enough to raise a glass to. So folks, what's your verdict on this golden nectar? Have we taken the myths too far, or is there more to uncover in the hive of history?
Feasting on the topic of ancient nutrition brings us to another blast from the past that's landed on modern plates, spirulina. Picture this. Aztec warriors chowing down on this green machine before heading into battle, drawing strength from what they considered a secret weapon. This algae was their beef before beef was a thing. We're talking about a tradition-steeped superfood that has spanned centuries. But here's the crunch. Does science back up the legends, or is it another case of history hyping up its heroes? And with spirulina getting scooped up for every smoothie and snack bar today, are we overlooking the ethical side of raiding these ancient cabinets?
No doubt, spirulina was major for the Aztecs, high in protein, vitamins, and minerals, pretty much a warrior's dream chow. They harvested it from Lake Texcoco, and records suggest they made cakes called tequitla out of this stuff. Now here's where modern science jumps in. Turns out they were onto something because spirulina is packed with nutrients. It's a complete protein, has omega-3s, and even boasts some B vitamins. But wrangling spirulina today? It's a whole new battlefield, Joe. Big companies might trample local practices and sustainability for profit. Ethically, we've got to tread carefully, respecting spirulina's roots while we stir it into our 21st century lifestyle. It's about connecting past wisdom with present-day practices without exploitation. That's a delicate dance, my friend.
No doubt, Simon, spirulina is a heavyweight in the nutrient department. We're talking about a real contender for the title of nature's multivitamin. It's almost like the Aztecs had their own ancient version of a protein shake. So science and history are shaking hands on this one. Spirulina truly walks the walk. But here's the rub. Even as we salute the superfood status, cash registers sing louder than battle cries. The real challenge lies in harvesting it sustainably and ensuring that the communities rooted in its history aren't left high and dry by commercial giants. So while we blend spirulina into our smoothies, let's not blend out the people and practices that brought it to global fame. Respect for origins, Simon. That's the kind of strength we want to draw from history.
Hey, Joe, here's a twist. Imagine if the Aztecs had trademarked spirulina back in the day. Big companies would be paying royalties to warrior descendants for every green latte sold at the corner cafe.
You're hitting the nail on the head, Simon. If the Aztecs had a legal team for spirulina rights, we'd have history's first superfood patent wars. Picture this. Corporate suits in canoes out on Lake Texcoco fighting for algae rights. Now that's a movie I'd watch. But let's fast forward to 2023. Spirulina is everywhere, and everyone's cashing in. Yet there's little talk about giving back to the descendants or investing in sustainable production. It's one thing to honor ancient knowledge with words. It's another to put your money where your mouth is. If we're going to tout these traditions, maybe some respect and royalties are overdue. Now that would be putting power behind our protein talk.
Royalties to the folks who have been custodians of spirulina for generations. Now that's an idea, Joe. Gives green business a double meaning, environmentally friendly and lining pockets fair and square. But here's my beef. While respecting history is noble, we've got to balance tradition with innovation. Spirulina farms are popping up with advanced tech, making it cleaner and more eco-friendly to produce. Yet, if we push profit over people, we miss out on ancient methods that could teach us a thing or two about sustainability. Bottom line, honor the past, support the present, and innovate for the future without going green with greed.
Fair point about honoring and learning from traditional methods, Simon. But let's play devil's advocate. What if sometimes the old ways aren't always the gold standard? We're in an era where eco-efficiency is king. Modern spirulina farming techniques vastly increase yield while minimizing environmental impact, something ancient methods might not be capable of. And doesn't innovation have its own value, worth rewarding? If a new tech means cleaner water and less land use, maybe that needs to take center stage for sustainability's sake. It's not just about looking back with reverence, it's also about forging ahead responsibly. Respecting the past is key, but we shouldn't be shackled by history when we've got science giving us a leg up for the future.
True, Joe, I'm all for progress. Modern-day aqua farms are game changers. They produce heaps more spirulina with a smaller footprint, keeping lakes and land in better shape than ever. But you've got to admit, if we rely only on shiny new tech, we might ditch valuable age-old knowledge. There's genius in those traditions, like cyclical farming that replenishes the soil, something we're just getting hip to today. Mixing the proud past with cutting-edge present can give us the best of both worlds. Learning from history doesn't mean living in it, right? We should be weaving tradition into innovation, making sure we're not just advancing in science, but also in ethics. That's how we make old school meet high tech with heart.
Yeah, Simon, blending the best bits of tradition and modern tech could give us a blueprint for ethical progress. Like, take those same cyclical farming practices from the Aztecs and pair them with today's environmentally conscious methods. Suddenly, you're not just growing spirulina, you're boosting biodiversity and supporting ecosystems. It's like respecting your grandparents while being cool with new gadgets. Both have value. The ancestors figured out the natural rhythms, so let's not throw that expertise out when we plug in our shiny new spirulina bioreactors. It's about evolving without losing the plot. Use the past as a foundation to build a greener future. It's symbiosis at its finest, don't you think?
Absolutely. The past as a foundation sounds neat, Joe, but let's spice this up. Consider this. Isn't there a risk of romanticizing these ancient practices? We gaze back at the Aztecs with such awe that we might miss something crucial. Maybe they were eco-friendly out of necessity, not choice. Tech today has evolved to solve the problems they never could. I mean, if the Aztecs had our gadgets and know-how, do you really think they'd stick to their old ways? They'd probably swap those canoes for speedboats. Modern methods should lead. Sure, learn from the ancients, but don't get stuck thinking their way was the pinnacle. Progress is about moving forward, even if you glance in the rearview mirror from time to time.
Good point, Simon. Romanticizing the past can blur our vision. The Aztecs were innovative for their time. We're just the next chapter. Take the best, leave the rest, and sail on. Speedboats, not canoes. Always forward, occasionally nodding to the past.
So, Joe, do you think there's a balance to strike between adopting these efficient modern methods and still keeping the essence of those ancient practices?
Absolutely, Simon. The balancing act is key, mixing new efficiencies with old wisdom. It's about finding harmony between rapid innovation and the soul of tradition. Spirulina, for one, represents how we can build on ancient strengths while steering towards a responsible future. Now, let's keep our minds open. What else can we unearth from history to intelligently fuel today's world?
Hey, speaking of unearthing history, you ever thought about how beekeeping's been the buzz since ancient times? Like bees were revered across Egypt, Greece, Rome, even considered divine nectar in some myths. Beekeeping was less about smokers and suits, more about wild hives and honey hunting. It's pretty sweet to think we're still chasing that golden goo just like our ancestors.
Indeed, Simon, bees have had humans buzzing around for millennia. But diving into ancient beekeeping is like opening Pandora's hive. Was it all divine nectar and reverence? Consider this. Maybe our ancestors were on a sticky wicket with overharvesting honey without understanding the environmental impact. They'd raid hives and take the lot, yet modern beekeeping emphasizes sustainability. We've got to look at these practices critically, not just as charming anecdotes of our history. Sure, they gave us sweet symbols in mythology, but let's not sugarcoat. It was survival, not just spirituality. Modern apiculture's challenge is to be mindful harvesters, learning from past missteps to ensure bees keep buzzing for generations to come.
Right on, Joe. Ancient beekeeping wasn't just about floating through fields of flowers and spiritual symbolism, it was hardcore survival stuff. It makes you wonder, they must have faced some serious stings to their ecosystem with that take-all approach. Crucial point, as we're unraveling these eco-puzzles today, can you imagine if ancient peeps had a beekeeper's handbook? Maybe things would be different. But hey, we've learned plenty since then. We know now to let the bees be, harvesting responsibly while giving them their space to thrive. That's the buzz we need moving forward.
Totally, Simon. And to paint an even richer picture, think back to how, in ancient Egypt, honey was a kind of liquid gold that only the pharaohs and the elite got their hands on. It symbolized power and affluence. Not just food, but embalming substance too, right? Flash forward to Greece. Aristotle himself buzzed about bees in his writings, pondering bee behavior. Meanwhile, over in Rome, folks like Pliny the Elder chatted up bees in natural history, diving into beekeeping techniques. Then there were the sacred vibes. Ancient gods got down with honey. People saw it as a bridge between the divine and the mortal. We've got tombs and temples etched with apiary tributes. But what clinches it is, despite different methods or mystical spins, one thing threaded through these tales is respect, a profound admiration for the tiny workers that make the sweet stuff. If we can channel some of that reverence today, blend it with our scientific smarts, well, we'd probably make those ancients proud. Beekeeping's been a human buzzword long before hashtags made it trendy.
Imagine if bees had their own ancient PR team, Apis mellifera and Associates, with tiny togas and papyrus flyers promoting honey's divine status.
As much as I'd love for bees to have had their own ancient PR squad, the reality is they did a lot of heavy lifting with little credit. If these winged workers hired me for some counter-branding, I'd argue that we've romanticized ancient beekeeping too much. Here's why. Imagine, back in the day, bee populations weren't managed or understood properly. Unchecked harvesting probably led to colony collapses. And let's not forget, no cute bee suits meant plenty of painful lessons learned via stings. Plus, with none of today's disease management, those bees were on their own against parasites and pests. The truth is, bees might have been veterans on the fluffy battleground of public opinion without truly understanding their role in our ecosystem balance. Maybe instead of honey gods, bees were more like unsung heroes, working under radar until science finally spotlighted their importance. They didn't need togas, they needed conservationists.
Oh, definitely. So you're saying the ancients kind of bobbled the bee ball, and now that we've got the science sorted, where do you think our focus should be to support our buzzy friends today?
Modern beekeeping definitely learned from the ancients, but we've got challenges they never anticipated, a lot related to our planet's health. Ancient beekeepers relied on natural cycles and didn't face agrochemicals or climate change like we do. But looking forward, envision urban beekeeping getting a bigger spotlight. Rooftop hives in cities are already a hit. There's big potential in gene editing for disease-resistant bees and exploring how our agricultural methods affect bee populations, all while ensuring we don't genetically mess them up. We're on the cusp of blending our ancestors' respect for nature with tech to create sustainable sanctuary cities for bees. Strategizing habitat restoration, planting pollinator-friendly flora, and maybe revisiting some age-old wisdom, like strategic hive placement that aligns with environmental patterns. This isn't just about honey anymore. It's making sure our ecosystem's tiny champions thrive in an ever-shifting world.
Absolutely. Urban beekeeping, gene editing, our ancestors might not even recognize it as the same craft. But in the end, whether we're talking about ancient rituals or modern methods, our goal stays constant, ensuring these vital pollinators keep buzzing along. It's a timeless story that continues to unfold. So what's the next chapter for our little buzzers?
You nailed it, Simon. It's the intricate dance of adaptation and survival. Speaking of which, it strikes me how bees, through nature's own brand of philosophy, have built their societies on some serious cooperation and division of labor, mirror images to humanity's complexities in a way. When you gaze into a hive, there's this buzzing metropolis, structured with a queen at the helm, workers diving into tasks like it's second nature. It's their version of the daily grind, and they're masters at it. What fascinates me is whether we can draw lessons from their unwavering dedication to the collective hive mind. How can we harness that sense of unity and purpose within our communities?
You know, it's tempting to slap a gold star on bees for teamwork, but hold the honey. Let's stir the pot a bit. Bees run on instinct, wired by nature to play their roles without question. Brilliant system for bees, sure, but humans? We're built with big brains that itch for debate and freedom of choice. If we all just buzzed around, slotting into assigned tasks with robotic loyalty, wouldn't society lose its flavor? Imagine if Da Vinci or Picasso had been too busy being workers instead of dreaming up masterpieces. It's cool to tip our hats to the bees' unity, but I reckon our human chaos has its own kind of magic. The messiness is where the real honey's made.
Ha! True, chaos is like the secret ingredient in our hive, isn't it? It brings flavor to our society that, without it, we'd be living life by numbers. No spice, no surprises. Sure, bees have their act together, but imagine if everyone stuck just to their roles with zero pushback. A world without artists rebelling against expectations or scientists smashing through impossible barriers? Forget about it. Our human hive may be messy, jumbled, and at times look out of control, but that mess, it's fertile ground for innovation. We need those renegades who shake things up. Bees stick to the script, but humans, we write new ones every day.
You got it. The script analogy is spot on. Bees, they've got this super efficient totalitarian gig going on. Queen bee calls the shots. Worker bees toil away. Drones have just one job. It's a rigid caste system, pre-programmed, no room for promotion or personal growth. Now, let's flip to humanity's script. We've got hierarchies, sure, but they're complex and often changing. Meritocracy, democracy, all that jazz. People argue, innovate, mess up, then write fresh chapters. Heck, we even land rovers on Mars. And as for rebellion, how about the rebel bees, the rogue swarms bucking the system, absconding from hives to start anew? That's nature's own brand of anarchy. Yet in both worlds, it's adaptability that spells success, be it through genetic hardwiring or social evolution. From bees, maybe we grab some tips on efficiency and playing well with others, but keep our wild card, the drive to question, redefine, and create. That recipe, my friend, could cook up the sweetest future of all.
I'm with you, Simon. The hive's efficiency is straight up admirable. It's got that utopian vibe we daydream about. But when I think about it, does the bee world have the edge in survival? Maybe. Yet I can't help but lean towards the human mess. It's where freedom reigns, and personal growth isn't just possible, it's celebrated. This whole ethos of daring to defy your programming, to flip the script, as you say, that's the essence of human spirit. Sure, bees are nature's marvel with their order and discipline, but humans? We're the wildcard species, banking on creativity, strife, emotional IQ, and yes, even chaos to push evolution's envelope. And something else, the rebel bee phenomenon? That's rogue innovation in the insect kingdom. Similar to us humans who leave comfort zones seeking adventure or disrupt the status quo with groundbreaking ideas. So while bees definitely school us in structure and social order, it's our unpredictable nature that might be our ultimate survival trait. We'll do well to blend some bee-style harmony with our unique brand of pandemonium for a truly buzzworthy society.
Speaking of breaking the mold, have you thought about those honey-making outlaws, the killer bees? They're like the punk rockers of the bee world, cross-breeded rebels that refuse to play by the rules, stirring up more than just pollen.
Killer bees, the mohawk sporting bad boys of the apian scene, nature's own rowdy twist on a honeybee. Shake things up in the hive, and out comes a hybrid that's equal parts fascination and cautionary tale.
Killer bees, officially called Africanized honeybees, are a potent example of when human intervention in bee breeding goes sideways. They emerged in the 1950s when European honeybees were crossbred with bees from Africa to increase honey production in Brazil. The idea was to craft a super bee, more honey, more resilience, suited for the tropics. But like every mad science tale, some of these bees went rogue, escaped into the wild, and spread throughout the Americas. They're notorious for their aggression, a tight security detail for their hive compared to typical honeybees, and they replicate fast, outpacing other bees and occupying new territories. They've got this trait to migrate and swarm often, which is problematic. But here's the kicker. Despite the bad rap, they pollinate plants just like your friendly neighborhood honeybees. So, what started off as a quest for bee utopia turned into an international nature thriller. These bees showcase adaptability and survival on steroids, a sharp contrast to our own human social experiments, where the results are anyone's guess. Killer bees took the playbook and tossed it. Whether we admit it or not, there's a little killer bee spirit in all human innovation.
When you think about it, the Africanized honeybee saga is like a mirror reflecting our own societal risks and rewards in messing with the norm. They're living proof of the unpredictable outcome when we toy with nature's blueprint. Think Jurassic Park, but with bees. Here's the philosophical twist. Their aggressive survival tactics push us to reconsider what balance means. We want a world that's efficient like the bee, yet adaptable and robust too. able to withstand both ants at the picnic and bears looking for a honeypot. The lesson for our human constructs might be that while pursuit of ideal systems is noble, we can't forget the wildcard factors. There's value in wild spirits like the killer bees refusing to conform. They keep the system on its toes. Maybe embracing the quirks in our society is acknowledging that every now and then, someone or something needs to stir the pot to avoid stagnation. Killer bees do it by instinct. We make it an art form.
You reckon bees hold debates over the best flower patches? Imagine nature's senate in session. It's all buzz and waggle dances.
Ha! A bee debate would be a spectacle. Just picture bees dropping hot takes through interpretive dance. But really, their information sharing is next-level efficient, making group decisions without ego clashing. It's something to ponder. How can we integrate more hive mind efficiency while keeping our human flair for passionate debate alive and buzzing?
Absolutely, Joe. If bees have their own system dialed in, ours is a mad lib by comparison. Transitioning from bee debates to unexpected encounters, imagine historical figures dealing with bees like we do, say Shakespeare, rewriting Hamlet after a bee flies up his ruff.
Shakespeare and a bee in his bonnet, literally. Now that's a comedy worth watching. But what about other icons of history? Can you imagine Einstein's hair getting even wilder after a close call with a hive during one of his thought experiments?
Picture Einstein in that wild hairdo, deep in thought. A bee buzzes by and he's like, EMCB? That's relativity for you. A theory of everything, just got stung by the simple life.
Einstein's bee revelation is classic. But what about Julius Caesar mid-speech in the Roman Senate? Suddenly he pauses, looks around all stoic and whispers, Et tu, bede? The empire wasn't just brought down by betrayal, but a strategic sting in the forum.
Right? There was Caesar, master of the Roman Republic. Imagine his shock when a tiny bee throws him off his game. Not quite Brutus's dagger, but hey, betrayal comes in small packages too. And let's not forget, bees back then were symbolic. The Romans actually considered them models of society and even military, due to their structure and industriousness. Ancient folks didn't just appreciate bees for honey, they revered them. Bees were symbols of immortality and resurrection in ancient Egypt. They could have thought a bee in the Senate was an omen. Even Napoleon Bonaparte slapped a bee on his coat of arms, eyeing that sweet, sweet emblem of power. So old Jules getting buzzed mid-oratory might have been more drama than comedy in Rome's pompous political theater.
It's wild how historical heavyweights used bees as symbols. But if Napoleon had a bee on his coat, I bet during battles it wasn't just strategy rattling his opponents. It was the buzz of bee, Bonaparte's secret weapon. Imagine the confessions. I came for glory, but fled from the bee.
Nah, Joe, I doubt any rough-and-tumble general would skedaddle because of a bee emblem. It's tough to imagine hardened soldiers bugging out over some fancy stitching on Napoleon's jacket when there were actual cannons to worry about.
Simon, you're right. Cannons over stinging insects any day. But I meant more in jest. Like imagine the absurdity of a gritty battlefield unexpectedly turning into chaos, not because of artillery, but a swarm of real bees just dropping in. Retreat! It's not the guns, it's the bees. The ultimate historical plot twist, comedy gold.
Imagine being mid-battle, ready to face the enemy, all serious, and then Mother Nature's own Air Force swoops in. Bees coming at you like tiny fuzzy fighter jets. It's charge, wait, no, scatter. Probably the only time in history where a battlefield could use some beekeepers as backup. Just flip those swords into giant fly swatters, and it's on.
Beekeepers on the front line, transforming soldiers into swarm dodgers. I see it. But imagine beekeeper generals? That'd stir up some real buzz. Orders barked through protective veils, strategic advances planned considering flower seasons and honey flows. And forget about smoke signals. They'd literally just use smokers to calm their troops down. Stand down, men. Let the bees pass. Maintain formation. Warfare meets wildlife documentary in the most hilariously unexpected mashup.
You've nailed it, Joe. And if we're mixing up beekeepers and generals, think of the battle cry. Unleash the bees. Suddenly, smoke grenades are just smoker puffs calming everyone down mid-fight. It's not about ducking from shrapnel anymore, but avoiding that friendly fire of bee stings. Warfare by day, pollination duty by night. That's one way to win hearts and minds and produce some sweet victory honey while they're at it.
Totally, Simon. Imagine wartime turning into some kind of hive-building community service. Troops are marching and suddenly it's hold formation, boys, incoming pollen. Tactical maneuvers now involve strategic flower planting. The only crossfire is between bees zipping from one bloom to another. Picture soldiers telling war stories post-retirement. You should have seen the size of that comb we built under fire. It brings a whole new meaning to boots on the ground. Gumboots in bee gardens, that is.
Jumping back a bit into history, the ancient world didn't just use bees for sweet symbolism. They were mega important in daily life. Egyptians floated hives down the Nile to pollinate crops. Back then, you could pay your taxes in honey. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and bees are legal residents. Seriously, people took bee theft so seriously, it was like stealing cattle. Now picture this. Medieval knights, all armored up, ready for a joust, a hive hanging above. A clumsy squire trips, whacks the hive, anarchy erupts. There you go, our armored heroes become buzzing chaos, clanking and ducking run amok. That's historical comedy right there. Joust canceled due to winged invaders.
So with the Egyptians treating hives like floating gold and honey as currency, do you think if bee theft was so common, it was like cattle rustling, that there might have been some kind of medieval bee police? Knights in shining armor chasing down the sticky-fingered honey hustlers?
I'm not buying it, Joe. A medieval bee police feels a stretch too far. Think about it. Back in those days, law enforcement was more about dealing with serious crimes like theft or treason. Bees were valuable, sure, but hustling honey probably wasn't grand enough to have the knights chasing you down unless you were pulling off some Robin Hood-style heist, stealing from royal apiaries. It's funny to picture, but realistically, local villagers handling their own bee business seems more likely.
You're probably right, Simon. Local disputes over bees likely got settled without a full night's chase. But you gotta admit, the image of armored bee cops is pretty sweet. No pun intended. So what's another historical figure that could have had a wild encounter with our winged friends?
Those knights might not have been bee cops, but they sure knew the value of good honey. It's like artisanal honey makers today. They're like alchemists turning flower nectar into liquid gold. It's all about that single origin stuff. You can almost taste the terroir, like wine, but sweeter, right? Wonder how these pros are handling the whole climate change curveball, though. That's got to mess with the whole honey game.
Definitely. You've tasted single origin honey. How's that compare for you? Noticed any distinct flavors or aromas that really speak to the terroir?
Honestly, Joe, I'm going to say that sometimes all this talk about single origin and terroir feels like a marketing gimmick. I've had my fair share of honey, and yeah, there are differences, but is it the ground, the air, or just the bees being bees? Tough to tell. Plus, folks who aren't honey connoisseurs might not even catch those subtle notes. Could be more about the story we're sold than the actual taste. It's the experience you buy into as much as the honey.
Well, Simon, while there is a bit of marketing sparkle thrown in, there's science behind the taste. The same type of flower can produce different nectars based on soil, climate, and even rainfall. It's not just bee magic. Like with wine, enthusiasts will pick it up, the location stamped in each drop. For honey aficionados, those subtle notes play like music. It's an art form being able to read them. Plus, it supports local ecosystems and biodiversity.
All right, fair point on the science. But let's face it, most people aren't sniffing their honey jars like a fine wine. They're slathering it on toast. And with all the environmental challenges up ahead, these artisanal honey makers got bigger fish to fry. What's this mean for the future of honey? We need those local ecosystems. And yeah, biodiversity's crucial. I want my grandkids to know real honey isn't just that bear-shaped bottle stuff. It's about keeping those artisan alchemists in business and bees busy buzzing.
Right. Slathering on toast is one thing, but let's not ignore the ripple effect here. If we lose artisanal honey craft, it's not just the loss of some fancy toast topping, it's a hit to agricultural diversity and our palate education. We're talking about centuries of knowledge, how to read the land, care for hives, all that wisdom at risk. I mean, if climate change keeps upping the ante, Those bear bottles might end up as relics in a museum with real honey, beside dinosaur bones. Making sure these crafts survive isn't indulgence, it's preservation, man.
Hey, new listeners just joining us on Infinite Podcast. You've hopped in at a sweet spot. We're buzzing about the ins and outs of artisanal honey, liquid gold crafted with the kind of care your grandma takes knitting a sweater. We're talking single origin honey that's as unique as a fingerprint, loaded with the essence of its homeland. But hey, this craft is under threat from climate change, which is no picnic for our bee buddies or the honey honchos trying to keep traditions alive. It's all about saving those ancient secrets and savoring every drop of that pure, sticky goodness. Keep it locked here for more golden banter with me and Joe.
Funny thing happened last summer, Simon. I took a road trip, out in the boonies, stumbled on this old-timer selling jars off the back of his truck right where the map turns to guesses. He was a third-generation bee whisperer. Every jar came with a story thicker than the honey inside. Now, this guy didn't just sell honey. He was passing down a history lesson, one taste at a time. That honey was like nothing from the store. It hit you with nostalgia you didn't know you had. Made me think, this isn't just about sweetening your tea, it's passing down a legacy. Each jar was a chapter of his family's book, right there in my pantry. It was then I realized what we've got to protect, not just the honey, but the stories they carry.
Joe, that's wild. Stumbling upon liquid history in a jar, now that's a road trip win. We ought to do more to safeguard those legacies. They're pure gold, with or without the honey.
You're not wrong, and that's the thing. In our push for progress, we're trampling traditions underfoot. They say not all that glitters is gold, but when it comes to this artisanal honey craft, that's the real deal. Yet here's the kicker. As much as we should protect these heritages, part of me wonders if tradition alone can cut it against modern challenges. It's a romantic notion, safeguarding the old ways, but I've seen tech do wonders for efficiency and quality in other fields. Does sticking strictly to the old ways hold us back from saving the bees with new tricks?
Joe, romance aside, the old ways are like my uncle's flip phone, nostalgic but not cutting it anymore. Adapt or become history, right? Traditional beekeeping is cool and all, but slap some tech on that, and boom, you've got efficiency meeting legacy. Imagine drones mapping out the best spots for hives or apps tracking hive health to nip problems in the bud. Let's not get stuck in the honey, evolve the craft, or the only bees we'll see are in pixelated games on our phones.
I hear you loud and clear, Simon. The thought of bees going the way of the dinosaurs kind of breaks my heart, honestly. I'm with you on evolution over extinction. Meshing old-school wisdom with new-age tech might just be the lifesaver we didn't know we needed. Plus, those same gadgets could probably help preserve some of the traditions too, like a bridge between eras. It's a compromise worth making to keep our future buzzing.
Right on, Joe. And you know, keeping the future buzzing, how do you think those bee whisperers would react to tech mingling with their ancient arts? Can they find a sweet spot using gadgets without losing the soul of their traditions?
Tough to say, Simon. I bet some purists would rather get stung by their entire hive than see a drone hovering above their apiaries. But here's the twist. Tech doesn't have to be the cold steel scalpel cutting through tradition. It can be a tool, like anything used since the first beekeeper smoked out a hive with a smoldering torch. The key is balance, right? Mesh tech where it counts, like tracking colony health or optimizing production, but keep that human touch for the craft itself. Otherwise, we might as well be making honey on Mars. The soul's in the artisanship. Let's not automate that away.
So, here's a nugget of honey truth. The real deal with these artisanal honeys is they've got single origin stamped all over them. What does that mean? It's like signing your name on a painting. These bees are pulling nectar from one type of flower or flowers in one area, getting all their sweet stuff from the same zip code. This isn't your run-of-the-mill mixed-up mystery goo. And what's bonkers is how bees can hit up to 2,000 flowers in a day. Just one bee. But for that top-shelf honey, it's all about where those 2,000 flowers are chilling. And hey, there's this whole dance called beekeeping, right? Not just anyone can don that netted hat and call themselves a keeper. It's big brain time. adjusting for weather, landscapes, even the type of plants around. A single season can flip the script completely for these dedicated folks. Plus, standards. Artisanal means no funny business. It's pure, no added sugars or syrups. That's why a proper jar might cost you more than a night at the movies. But heck, with all the work that goes into it, that's a small price for liquid gold.
Absolutely, Simon. These artisans are really the Michelangelos of the bee world. Every jar a masterpiece with its own story, brushed onto your taste buds. And as you say, imagine the dedication to keep every drop pure in an age where cutting corners is common practice. Just goes to show, there's more alchemy in a teaspoon of this stuff than most folks realize. Question is, what new secrets will tomorrow's beekeepers discover in their quest for perfection? Because the truth is, each day is a new chapter in the saga of liquid gold.
You ever think about how in ancient times, folks whipped up desserts not just to tickle their sweet tooth, but as a hotline to the gods? Imagine that pastry chef/priest gig.
For sure, it's wild to think that the bake sale of yesteryear was doubling as a spiritual sense. What kind of sacred sweets were they conjuring up back then?
Picture the pyramids, and you're not just seeing ancient tombs, they're giant billboards for their dessert game. The Egyptians, they didn't just build wonders, they baked them. We've got records of sweets made with honey, fruits, nuts, often as offerings to secure a sweet afterlife. And the Maya? Their chocolate was sacred enough to fit for the gods. These weren't just treats, they were mystical munchies.
I get that, Simon, but let's not sugarcoat history too much. Sure, the ancients had their sacred sweets, but I reckon there was more to these rituals than divine dessert menus. We're talking about societies where lifespan was short, life was tough, and the afterlife was everything. Those sweets, tactical moves. Like, here's a honey cake, now don't haunt my dreams, okay? The spiritual angle is fascinating, but I'd bet my last chocolate coin it was part superstition, part hope, all human. And let's face it, everyone talks about the spiritual side. Imagine being the guy whose job was to taste test for the gods. Now there's a roll that got your foot in the temple door.
Oh, come on, Joe. You're selling our ancestors short. These desserts were more than just bribe food for the afterlife or chill pills for restless spirits. It's about connection, man. Sacred sweets were a language, a sugar-spun dialogue between worlds. They believed these treats could elevate their prayers, making every bite a step closer to the divine. And if munching on a honey-laden cake might edge my soul a bit closer to eternal bliss, you better believe I'd be all in on that belief buffet.
You got me there, buddy. There's a beauty in thinking our ancestors were crafting these confections as a bridge to something greater than themselves. Every dollop of honey, every sprinkle of nuts, it was more prayer than recipe. It does tug at the heartstrings, this idea that something as sweet and simple as dessert could embody such hope, crossing into the sacred. It's a humbling reminder of the mystery and awe they found in their world, and a testament to the lengths they'd go to reach out to the cosmos with a spoonful of sugar.
Yeah, heartstrings and cosmos aside, Joe, let's get real. Can you imagine if we took that mindset today? Your birthday cake would need a shaman to bless it. It's nuts to think people would be knee-deep in flour, eggs, and spiritual expectancy. But truly, though, desserts as divine currency? That's one sweet economy. Imagine keeping the heavens happy with a tray of brownies. It's funny, but kind of awesome. Today we scoffed down a cupcake without a second thought, and there they were, offering it up like, here you go, deity, enjoy this sacred sponge cake. Makes me wonder, if I accidentally set off the smoke alarm baking cookies, could I spin it as an incense ritual gone rogue?
Last Christmas, my friend's grandma rolled out this ancient family recipe for cinnamon rolls. Now these weren't just any buns. They came with a tale of her great-great-grandmother who believed in kitchen magic. Every fold had intention, and each sprinkle of sugar carried wishes for joy and health. As we prepped the dough and spiced it just so, she said these rolls brought her family through tough winters back in the old country. So there we were, getting our hands messy, thinking this is cute, but probably just superstition, right? But when we sat down to eat them, something shifted. Whether it was the spell of the spice, just the shared act of making them, Those rolls made us all pause, a moment of pure connection over something sweet, feeling like maybe, just maybe, there was a bit of the divine tucked inside that swirl of dough. And joking about smoke alarms aside, I can sort of get why those ancients intertwined their baked goods with higher hopes. Not saying I'll start praying to the oven gods whenever I make toast, but hey, food has power beyond filling your stomach. It fills the soul, too.
That's some story, Joe. And it hits home, doesn't it? Bite into a cinnamon roll and maybe nibble on a piece of history. These ancient recipes are packed with more than just ingredients. They're brimming with tales, prayers, hopes. Makes you realize what we whip up in the kitchen could carry more magic than we give it credit for. Who knows what secrets those old family cookbooks contain? Might be worth digging up some of ours next time. What do you say?
Let's flip the script. Instead of humans hunting for divine favor with honey cakes, what if gods were sugar fiends? That'd give nectar of the gods a whole new layer.
Nah, Joe. Gods being sugar junkies? That's stretching it thinner than phyllo pastry. It wasn't about the gods hitting a sugar rush. It was pure symbolism. Honey stands for abundance, health, a natural sweetener you can't just whip up in a lab. So when mortals offered it up, it's like they were saying, look how hard we're trying down here. It's respect, homage. The deities get sweetness without lifting a finger, while humans strut their stuff with top-tier hive produce. Win-win? You betcha.
Simon, that's a sweet analogy. But don't you think honey as a symbol of effort and riches might have been even more significant given its scarcity back then?
Scarcity? Joe, I'd argue honey was like liquid gold back in the day. If you handed over honey to the gods, it wasn't just a sign of effort. It screamed luxury and sacrifice. Like telling Zeus, here, have my best stuff. Now please don't smite me. Plus, getting honey without modern gear? That was a superhero quest, nature's version of a booby-trapped treasure room. Sweet indeed, but easy? Not on your life.
Oh, totally. It was like the original extreme sport. But let's unpack it further. The sweet symbolism goes deep. In Hinduism, for example, honey's part of the Panchamrita, a divine mix used in rituals embodying immortality and wisdom. You've also got the Greek god Apollo, who had ties to bees and honey. These were not just offerings, but elements acknowledging the god's immensity. And check out the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. That tradition of dipping apples in honey, wishing for a sweet new year. It's a direct line from those ancient practices. We can't overlook these historic threads, weaving through our modern feasts and festivals. Every dollop of honey carries millennia of human hopes and divine dreams.
Hold up, Joe. Let's park the reverence bus for a sec. Could it be that we're romanticizing this a tad? Honey and sweet stuff in rituals sounds high-minded, but think about it. Humans back then were as practical as they come. Offerings were survival tactics. A splash of honey to the gods could have been less about immortal wisdom and more, don't let my crops fail. It's not all mystical dreams. It's folks playing their best hand with the cards nature dealt them. Let's give them credit for knowing which side their bread was honeyed on, eh?
Fair point, Simon. You're right on the practicality. It's what makes humans human. Our ancestors were about making it through to the next season without a hitch. Honey and other sweets as offerings weren't purely for health or abundance. It was insurance, like saying, here's some top-shelf sweetness. Now please keep that locust swarm to yourself. And yeah, we've been playing this give and take with nature since day one, offering a piece of our survival in exchange for the whole pie, so to speak. We just dressed it up over time with layers of meaning and belief. But beneath all that, it was, and still is, a fundamental game of respect and negotiation with the elements, hoping that if we showed good faith, nature, or what was seen as divine agency behind it, would reciprocate.
Exactly, Joe. It's quid pro quo with the cosmos. Here's some honey. Now let's talk about that no-drought deal, yeah? Keeping it real with the gods, an ancient art of sweet bargaining.
Strip past the cosmic bargaining chip angle, and it hits you. The sweet offerings to gods marked major recognition of forces people felt were beyond control. It plugged into our primal wiring for trade and exchange. Honey's rarity made it precious, perfect for aiming high in negotiations with those omnipotent beings they figured ruled their fates. Even now, the sentiment lingers, a bit of sweetness to smooth over life's bitter edges. Whether we're talking old-school honeyed offerings or lighting candles today, it's about hope, a way to influence what we can't grasp. But don't mistake it for blind faith. It's as strategic as it gets, a kind of celestial diplomacy.
Celestial diplomacy. Come on, Joe. Let's not glam it up too much. Those ancients weren't drafting treaties with the gods over tea and scones. They were tossing honey into fires hoping for the best. It's cute to think of Granny invoking kitchen magic with her cinnamon rolls, but let's face it, the universe is chaos. If drizzling some honey over an altar could give someone a sense of control amidst that chaos, sure, I get it. But let's not forget that the raw deal for bees in this so-called diplomacy. They do all the work, while Apollo takes all the credit. Talk about a sting operation.
True, the bees are the unsung heroes in this cosmic trade-off. All that buzzing effort just to sweeten the pot for both gods and mortals. It's raw nature we're leveraging here. The ancients understood. They were transparent with their intents when making offerings. Honey was a peace offering to the chaos you mentioned, a gesture of appeasement, and perhaps a bit of wishful thinking. They didn't gloss over it. They acknowledged their place in the world, recognized their limits, and used what they had to nudge the odds. It might seem quaint to us, but back then it was as real as it got, a bid to bring order, or at least the illusion of it, into a tumultuous existence.
You hit the nail on the head, Joe. It was about making peace with life's big mess. And that's the thing. Regardless of how we see it, this sweet deal with deities gave our ancestors a coping mechanism, a way to feel heard. Who knows? Maybe there's more to these rituals than meets the eye. After all, who doesn't want some sweetness to balance out the daily grind? What's next on the honey docket? Beekeeping Gods 101.
While on the topic of sweets and rituals, it's not all serious business. There are some quirky tales out there when sugary treats were like ancient wingmen. Ever hear about licorice love potions being all the rage?
Licorice love potions? Sounds like Cupid in candy form. Apparently, munching on licorice made you irresistible back then. Imagine that pickup line, "Got any licorice?" as the ancient version of, "You come here often?" This stuff wasn't just sweet, it was love's secret weapon with a hilarious side of placebo effect. The old-school charm shop must have been a riot, shelves stocked with sweets to snag your sweetheart. Sprinkle this, chew that. It's like medieval Tinder, but you need a toothbrush after swiping right.
So, do you think those ancient candy connoisseurs really bought into the whole licorice love charm idea, or were they just in it for the laughs?
Oh, Joe, I bet they knew it was a stretch. Humans have always been keen on the placebo effect, thinking something will work so strongly that you actually see results. Ancient folks likely had a good laugh while nibbling on licorice love charms, but deep down, they probably realized sweet talk and good old-fashioned charisma did more for love than any candy could. It's the thought that counts, though, right? Keep eating that magic candy if it makes you confident enough to shoot your shot.
But what if they did more than just give a placebo boost? There's a reason these charmed candies stuck around in lore. Maybe beyond the humor, there was something about sharing sweets like licorice that created a real connection. Sharing food is intimate, establishes trust. So while we're quick to dismiss the old belief as a gag, isn't there validity in the ritual itself? Handing over a piece of licorice wasn't just symbolic, it was a gesture, an icebreaker, promoting interaction, and maybe sparking something genuine. It goes beyond superstition to basic human bonding.
That's fair, Joe. Sharing a treat like licorice? That's primal bonding right there, not just fluff. Sure, we can chuckle at the idea of candy as Cupid's little helper, but it boils down to sharing a moment. Handing someone a sweet isn't about casting spells. It's creating chances for sparks to fly. It's less about the magic in the sweets and more about the magic in the moment. When you share that piece of licorice, you're opening up a space for something real. The charm was in the gesture all along. The candy was just along for the ride.
Exactly. And this candy as a catalyst concept is timeless. The charm may be rooted in humor, but it gets people laughing together, and that's where the true magic happens. You toss someone a licorice rope. Next thing you know, you're sharing stories, smiles, or even a date. The belief in sugary spells gives way to real chemistry. And let's be honest, having a quirky icebreaker like a love potion can take the edge off meeting someone new. It's less about believing in the supernatural power of sweets and more about enjoying the absurdity while making genuine connections. And hey, if a bit of licorice leads to love, who are we to judge the mysteries of sweet serendipity?
Absolutely, Joe. Sharing a laugh over some enchanted licorice lays the groundwork for something special. It's that perfect combo of silly and sweet that can unexpectedly lead to real sparks flying. Makes you wonder what other kooky confectionery tales are out there just waiting to be unwrapped. What's next? Chocolate as a method to predict the future. Now that's a future I'd buy into.
Speaking of chocolate futures, it reminds me how sugar has always been shaped into both our dreams and traditions. It's like those intricate sugar sculptures that have marked celebrations across cultures for centuries. They're not just desserts, they're edible artistry with a deep history in religious and festive occasions. This craft is serious skill, not your everyday cake decorating. Think sculpting, but with a sweet twist. These ornate creations are so much more than eye candy. They carry the spirit of times past right onto the modern banquet table. What if we took the same approach to life, crafting our days as deliberately and beautifully as sugar artists do with their sculptures?
Meticulous sugar art? I respect the skill, don't get me wrong, but let's be real. Sugar sculptures in all their glory seem a bit over the top for my taste. It's wild. The amount of time and effort that goes into creating something you just end up devouring in seconds. Talk about fleeting art. I mean, can you imagine slaving over a towering masterpiece for days, only for it to be gobbled up faster than a kid unwrapping candy? Plus, today's celebration cakes are more about shock value on social media than sacred tradition. Sure, they're inspired by those old practices, but let's not kid ourselves. The times have changed, Joe. Now, it's less about the spirit and more about the gram.
Yeah, there's definitely a bittersweet irony in creating something so intricate and ephemeral. You work tirelessly on a sugar sculpture, only to watch it disappear in moments. It's almost poetic, isn't it? It really does highlight our society's shift towards instant gratification. Everything's for the gram, like you said. That blast of social media attention seems to overshadow the true artistry and the deeper cultural significance that these pieces once held. We've traded longevity for likes, and in the process, maybe we're missing out on the layers of meaning that these edible masterpieces were meant to convey. It'd be nice to see a revival that honors both the craft and the original intent behind these sugar creations.
So, Joe, considering the root of these sugar sculptures in tradition and culture, do you think there's a way to merge that genuine artistry with our current obsession for quick social media fame? Can we find a middle ground where the craft is respected but still fits within our modern world of hashtag moments?
Well, I would say the key might lie in acknowledging the heritage while adapting to contemporary trends. For example, consider Mexico's Day of the Dead. Sugar skulls have been a cornerstone, a craft passed down through generations. These aren't just sweets, they're symbols of remembrance. Now, these designs are seen everywhere, on t-shirts, tattoos, and yes, Instagram. Then there's the European tradition from as far back as the Middle Ages, subtleties, or soteltes, which were sugar sculptures presented during feasts to represent power and wealth, often telling a story or conveying a message to guests. So we've got these rich historical contexts that could be brought forward into modern confectionery art. By educating people on the history and significance behind these traditions when they post about them or consume these sugary creations, we add layers to an otherwise surface-level interaction with culture.
All right, Joe, digging deeper, sugar art ties us to our ancestors. It's a bridge to the past, even if on Instagram we gloss over it. If folks knew the lore behind a sugar skull as they piped icing onto a cookie for their post, maybe they'd feel a connection, not just seek likes. Same with soteltes. They weren't just show-offs of wealth. If we told their stories as we crafted New Age versions, each dessert would be like an edible history lesson. We can blend tradition with trends by infusing every sugar creation with its tale, making culture as irresistible as the sweets themselves. How about that for a sweet treat with substance?
Yet change is constant, and clinging too tightly to tradition risks making these sugar arts stale, no pun intended. Progress means adaptation, sometimes at the expense of historical accuracy. The modern spin on these traditions might stray from the original, but can inject new life into the craft, keeping them relevant. Plus, creating a perfect blend of old and new isn't simple. Some subtlety is inevitably lost in translation. Simply put, not everything ancient was golden, and not every modern twist is sacrilege. If the core of the practice, the creativity and painstaking effort is honored, maybe that's enough, even if it's just hitting it big on social media. After all, visibility can be a vessel for education and preservation too.
So, Joe, you think the visibility of these sugar crafts on social media could actually help keep the traditions alive in a new form, even if it's not a carbon copy of the original practice?
Absolutely. Preserving the past isn't about creating an exact replica. It's more about maintaining the essence. By highlighting sugar art on social media, we're creating an archive that wasn't possible before. Take Europe in the Tudor era, where elaborate sugar banquets were a feast for the eyes as much as the stomach. Those creations were fleeting by nature. People got word of these feasts through paintings or writings, if at all. Now, we can instantly share and preserve these moments digitally. Moreover, the tradition of sugar art flourished in places like the Middle East and Asia too, with sugar often taking on luxurious forms from delicate flowers to impressive beasts, reflecting both skill and symbolism important to various events. Today, though less rooted in cultural ceremonies, modern cake artists draw upon this rich tapestry, blending centuries-old techniques with the desire to innovate. This digital exposure helps to inform and inspire new generations about the craft's rich diversity and encourage experimentation while honoring its origins. So while methods evolve, the elemental combination of artistry and celebration remains, stitching together our human timeline, one sugar sculpture at a time.
Hey, last-minute listeners, you're tuning into a sugary convo about the art of saccharine sculptures that's lasted since who knows when. We've been chewing over how sugar's not just for tasting sweet, it's steeped in history, with sugar skulls, subtleties, and Asian sugar art telling stories bigger than your belly can handle. From ancient traditions to Instagram posts, this craft has morphed but keeps its core, creativity and a reason to celebrate. Stick around to see what else we'll sprinkle into today's tasty topic.
For sure, the world of sugar art is vast and varied, like digging through a giant candy bowl of history. Every piece has its place, whether it's sitting atop an altar or starring in your latest social feed. So even as we move forward, there's always more to uncover about these sweet traditions. Who knows what other sugary secrets are waiting to be rediscovered and given a new twist? Let's keep this conversation going and watch how sugar keeps shaping our stories and celebrations. What cultural confection do you think deserves a modern makeover next?
And speaking of confections that could use a modern twist, Joe, have you ever considered how much religious symbolism we've got tucked away in chocolate? From ancient sacred rituals to your local candy shop's Easter aisle, cocoa's been cloaked in reverence for ages. But it's not just about popping a piece of divinity into your mouth. It's art with a side of sanctity.
Well, honestly, the idea of mixing religious symbolism with chocolate art feels a bit tricky to me. Here's the thing. Religion is deeply personal and often sensitive. Chocolate, while delicious, isn't exactly sacred. When we start crafting deities or spiritual icons out of something you can munch on during your coffee break, it could be seen as trivializing those beliefs. For many, these symbols hold profound meanings that go well beyond aesthetic or gastronomic value. So while chocolatiers might aim to honor traditions, there's a fine line between homage and insensitivity. Not everyone wants their sacred cows, or in this case, cacao, served up with a side of irreverence. We've got to ask ourselves, where's the line between appreciation and appropriation?
Joe, I get what you're saying. We need to tread lightly when sacred symbols become snackable. It's like, are we honoring traditions or just cashing in on them? Every symbol etched in chocolate has a backstory. Somebody's faith and culture that shouldn't be taken lightly. Chocolatiers diving into this have got to do their homework, respect the roots, and maybe even collaborate with those who hold these beliefs dear. Only then can they truly craft something that satisfies the soul as much as the taste buds. No easy recipe there, my friend.
Yeah, collaboration and understanding are key, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. When does cultural sensitivity cross into excessive self-censorship? The world's full of diverse expressions of faith. Take Mexico's Day of the Dead. There you've got sugar skulls that have already crossed over into chocolate. Then look at the Hindu festival of Diwali, with its intricate sweets that often include divine imagery. Some could argue these traditions have been shared respectfully and even become appreciated by wider audiences through their edible representations. But here's the rub. Is it possible we're so concerned about stepping on toes that chocolatiers might shy away from truly innovative work that could actually bridge gaps between cultures? Could setting too many rules stifle creativity and meaningful cultural exchange? Sure, no one should be disrespectful, but maybe there's something to be said for courageous culinary art that dares to start a conversation about what's sacred.
Joe, sacred cows need to be approached with sturdy gloves. But let's chew on some facts. Chocolate's holy ties go way back, friend. The Mayans and Aztecs were all about cacao. It was more than a treat. It was fit for the gods, used in ceremonies, offered as gifts to deities. Roll into Europe. Catholic monks sipped chocolate during religious fasts, a loophole in the abstinence rules, if you will. Now, consider those shared traditions. Translating sugar skulls to chocolate, you tap into that reverence built around Dia de los Muertos, an altar staple turned edible art. It can help spread cultural awareness, done right. Or Diwali, where sweets called mithai, often bearing spiritual motifs, deck every celebration table. When chocolatiers take up these designs, they've got to ensure there's more essence and less excess entertainment value. The line between respect and restriction? Fine as spun sugar, Joe. For every artist making waves, there's a risk of waters muddied by misunderstanding. Creativity without borders is thrilling, yeah, but the GPS should still point to Respectville, destination, understanding central. That conversation starting Choco art sure needs a purist driving to guide it.
Well, here's a fun twist. Imagine if ancient cultures had Instagram to showcase their cocoa concoctions. The Mayans with a feed full of frothy cacao drinks, hashtagged food of the gods, or medieval monks posting their fasting hacks. It's wild to think how these ancient practices would have changed with today's tech.
Imagine scrolling through monk life and seeing a friar's cheat meal, a sneaky chocolate during Lent. Now that's what I call holy temptation.
Well, here's a ponder. What if we stripped away the holy aspect and looked at it purely as art? Say we celebrate the craftsmanship without the spiritual tag. We appreciate Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel for its artistry, right? Can't chocolate be the medium without dragging in the divine? You get to savor the beauty with or without the belief. It's a thought, sacred art that's sinfully good but without the sermon. Could be a sweet spot.
But here's the kicker, Joe. If you rip out the holy heart of these Choco creations, aren't we just left with a sugar-coated shell? We'd miss the depth. It's like biting into an Easter egg and finding it hollow. The whole point is the fusion of spirit and sweetness. That's where the magic happens.
All right, for those just hopping on, we're slicing through a rich cake of debate here. It's all about chocolate. Yeah, that melt-in-your-mouth miracle, but with a twist of the divine. We're talking ancient traditions where cacao was not just a treat, but a tribute to the gods, all the way to today's Easter bunnies and sacred sweets popping up in chocolatiers' showcases. It's an artistic dance with religious symbolism, sugar, and respect. The hefty question we're unwrapping: can spiritual significance survive in modern chocolate art without feeling hollow? It's chewy food for thought that goes way beyond taste.
Circling back, Joe, it's the soulful stir of faith in these treats that adds layers to their sweetness. Like honoring an ancestor with a sugar skull or lighting up a home with Diwali mithai, chocolate as an art form can bridge the gap between sacred sentiment and sensory satisfaction. It anchors us to the past while letting us delight in the present. Get item count. My take: when a chocolatier molds Ganesh or crafts a cross, They're spinning a delicate web that connects belief with bite, making these pieces more than just a feast for the eyes. Stripping away the divine misses the mark. The reverence is part of the flavor. Sure, we savor Michelangelo for his brushstrokes, but those strokes tell biblical tales. Without the stories, you're left asking, what's the point? The essence, my friend, is in the enigma of combining the ephemeral with the eternal, and that's damn delicious.
That's deep, Simon. But let's flip the script for a second. Say we've got these delectable pieces of chocolate art loaded with religious context. Do they risk becoming mere novelties? What if Ganesh in Ganache or a saint in Swiss becomes just another Instagrammable moment, stripped of sanctity by hashtags and likes? If faith turns into flavor of the month, doesn't that cheapen tradition? Here's a spicy take. Keep divine delights, keep 'em coming even, but let's also raise the bar. Challenge chocolatiers to dig deeper, maybe through narratives that accompany their creations, giving a voice to those silent symbols. Now that could help bite back against any loss of meaning. As for the artisans, it's on them to tread thoughtfully, craft responsibly, and maybe even enlighten us nibblers along the way.
Totally get where you're coming from, Joe. Transforming holy figures into a snack could knock the halo off tradition, making it just another trending topic until the next one pops up. But here's an idea. What if that's just the convo starter? Picture it. Each nibble is a nudge to explore deeper. Chocolatiers could partner with storytellers, creating treats that come with tales taller than their sugar content. Let these sweet sculptures open doors to understanding the very beliefs they represent. So listeners, what are your thoughts on this choco-religious mashup? Chew on that, and let's see where this tasty train of thought takes us next.
You know, Simon, this makes me think of Saint Honoratus, the patron saint of bakers and pastry chefs. He's basically the holy guardian of dough and deliciousness. Imagine having that title on your resume. It's like each croissant has a divine approval stamp.
Yeah, Joe, talk about a heavenly gig. St. Honoratus sounds like the guy you'd want on your speed dial for that all-important bake-off. I bet bakers and sweet makers light candles asking for his blessing to avoid the dreaded soggy bottom on their pies. With the mixing bowl as his altar, he turns floury messes into pastry successes. That's some divine intervention I can get behind. And hey, marketing-wise, baked with the blessing of St. Honoratus. Now that's branding gold.
For sure, but let's not coat everything in sugar here. Folks might sprinkle in a saint's name for that heavenly marketing spin, but does it really add substance, or is it just sprinkles on top? Stabject honoring St. Honoratus or not, a bad batch of brownies needs more than a prayer to save it. Plus, come on, attributing your flaky pastries to some celestial backing might be a stretch. If every pastry shop claims divine favor, doesn't the miracle become, well, kind of mundane?
Oh, sure, Joe. If every baker starts claiming celestial backup, it kind of waters down the whole miracle business. It's like, another day, another divinely inspired donut. I bet St. Honoratus is up there rolling his eyes thinking, folks, I can't be in a million ovens at once. Plus, imagine the saintly conference call, St. Valentine on hold while Honoratus deals with a cupcake crisis. Divine indeed.
Even amid the chuckles about saintly intercessions in kitchens worldwide, there's a baked-in truth to these traditions. Take St. Valentine, often associated with love and courtship, but also linked to chocolate, as his feast day aligns with when confectionery sales go through the roof. No miraculous event connected to cocoa, but clever marketing has crowned him an unofficial patron of chocolatiers. Moreover, confectionery miracles aren't just testimonials in the back of a bakery. They're rooted in festivals like Italy's annual Festa di San Biagio, where throat ailments are believed to be healed with blessed bread. These events solidify the connection between faith, food, and a bit of mystical flavor that transcends mere lore. It becomes part of a community's shared identity and tradition, passed down with every sugary treat.
I'm with you, Joe. It's fascinating how St. Valentine's story became interwoven with the high drama of chocolate sales, talking serious cheddar for chocolatiers every February. No miracle narrative needed when you've got heart-shaped candy flying off shelves, right? It's like St. Valentine's looking down, winking, and saying, "You owe me one." And then there's the Festa di San Biagio, That's the real miracle meal ticket. It's not just about believing bread will save your throat. It's the community feasting together, sharing stories, basically breaking bread, blessed by a saint's rep. That's the kind of tradition with staying power. A delicious mix of the holy and the yeast mystical that bakes up some pretty appetizing folklore.
Right on, Simon. These events have layers, like the finest puff pastry. It's this communal table where legends, commerce, and spirituality converge. And you've got to appreciate that staying power you mentioned. These stories have serious shelf life. Look at how St. Valentine's impact has woven through generations, morphing from a tale of martyrdom into a full-blown festival of love and chocolate. Every year, it revives his narrative, sparking passion and spurring sales. Same with San Biagio. There's deep-rooted belief kneaded into that blessed bread. It's culinary culture wrapped in ritual, served up as edible heritage. And beyond that doughy magic touch of San Biagio, there's this chewy metaphor. You're not just nourishing bodies, but feeding souls, sustaining more than just hungry bellies with these patron saints' sweet legends.
Imagine if St. Valentine teamed up with Cupid for a divine love and chocolate task force, firing off arrow-shaped bonbons to ignite passions and plump up chocolatier pockets. Now, that's what I'd call a match made in heaven.
That's a charming picture you're painting, Simon. Makes me think, what sort of divine chocolate concoctions would they be firing off, do you figure? Special flavors that spark love, or just the tried and true classics guaranteed to get the heart racing?
Well, Joe, in the heavenly arsenal of chocolate, we might find flavors as mischievous and varied as love itself. How about a chili-infused truffle, a bit of heat to get the heart throbbing, or something with a zing of citrus zest to awaken those taste buds like a new romance? Going historical, we'd probably see decadent fillings with honey or almonds, ingredients that have been symbols of love way back since ancient times. Remember, honey was associated with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And let's not forget Saint Drogo, often overlooked. He's the patron saint of coffee house keepers and, by extension, all of us in dire need of that chocolate coffee combo fix. You've got this entire pantheon of patron saints potentially collaborating on an after-dinner mince line. We're talking divine dessert collaborations here. Those old traditions knew their stuff. Mix the right ingredients, throw in some centuries-old lore, and you've got yourself a treat that tells a tale.
Okay, Simon, let's not get ahead of ourselves with this pantheon of flavor influencers. As much as I like the idea of St. Drogo jazzing up my espresso with celestial Java vibes, do we really need a patron saint for every preference? If they're all in on culinary creativity, where does human skill come into play? Consider this. Chefs and chocolatiers train for years to master their crafts. Slap a saint's name on it, and suddenly it's divine intervention, not human dedication and innovation. Nah, give credit where it's due. The hands that pour the coffee, blend the chocolate, fold the dough, they're the real MVPs here. Plus, I'd argue that Saint Drogo might be more interested in serving up a prayer than a latte. Let's keep the saints on the inspirational side and let our earthly talents handle the aprons and the oven mitts. Don't overmix the batter, you know? Keep the saints for stories and motivation, but remember, it's people making your sweets reach heavenly heights.
Joe, this reminds me of my grandma and her infamous apple pie. She had this old, dog-eared recipe book with a saint on the cover, right? But let me tell you, despite what that book implied, those pies weren't divine because some saint waved a magic wand over the apples. Here's the secret sauce. Grandma was up at the crack of dawn, peeling apples until her hands ached. She worked that crust like it owed her money, all while muttering a mix of prayers and choice words I won't repeat here. Even then, she'd say the true miracle was in failing and trying again. Her perseverance was the actual patron saint of that kitchen. So yeah, her pies were out of this world, should have been canonized for their crumb topping alone, but it was her tireless honing of craft that put them there, not just flipping to the saintly assistance section of her cookbook. Saints in stories added flavor, sure, but it's the human touch that makes the masterpiece.
That's it, Simon. Grandma's apple pie, a testament to human will over divine shortcuts. Let's set aside the saintly cookbook for a minute. If perseverance and skill whipped up with a dash of sass is what bakes excellence into every slice, maybe our own daily grind needs that recipe more than we think.
Bringing it back to our chocolate theme, and since we're talking about human craft in sweets making, let's not forget the hilarious slip-ups that even the best chocolatiers face. I mean, behind every divine creation could be a story of holy cocoa that totally wasn't supposed to happen. It's these whimsical mishaps that sometimes lead to the most sacred of sweet treats. Now, how about we confess some of our own chocolate sins, Joe? Ever snuck a cheeky taste when you should have been tempering that chocolate?
Oh, Simon, man, absolutely. The number of times I've been caught quality testing chocolate before it even had a chance to set. Let's just say, if there was a patron saint for sneaking bites, I'd probably be in their congregation. And let's not even talk about those accidental chocolate-on-chocolate kitchen fiascos, like the time I thought I could improvise a double boiler and ended up with more of it on me than in the molds. Imagine if that blunder turned into the next big thing. Messy Joe's chocolate chaos. It has a ring to it, doesn't it?
Messy Joe's chocolate chaos. Now that's marketing genius. Joe, I'm picturing a chocolate sculpture of you mid-chaos, covered head to toe in chocolate splatter. It could be like an interactive museum piece. Folks come by, poke the statue, and boom, a piece of accidental art they can eat. It'll be so popular we might need to seek absolution for contributing to the world's chocolate sins.
I don't know about genius, Simon. That sounds like a recipe for disaster, or worse, a waste of good chocolate. Imagine crowds poking at a chocolate statue. It's chaos. I can already see the sacred creation turning into a crime scene with chocolate fingerprints everywhere. But let's pivot here. We're talking whimsical mishaps, so there must be people out there who've dropped a chili pepper into a vat of melting chocolate and thought they ruined the batch, only to discover they've concocted some kind of spicy Aztec gold. So listeners, have you ever messed up royally only to stumble upon a new flavor sensation? Do share your delicious disasters and serendipitous successes. Give us a taste of your own Messy Joe moments without the sticky cleanup.
Joe, that's a chocolate story to melt for. You got me thinking, what about our listeners who have their own home-baked tales of mix-ups that turned into triumphs? Anyone ever accidentally invent a new treat in the kitchen because you confused sugar with salt, or maybe spilled vanilla into your cocoa mix? Share those sweet serendipities.
In the world of chocolate, mishaps have quite a pedigree when it comes to creating new treats. The history of confectionery is dotted with delightful accidents, leading to beloved sweets. For instance, chocolate chip cookies, now think about this, were an accident by baker Ruth Wakefield. She ran out of baking chocolate and substituted it with broken pieces of Nestle's semi-sweet chocolate, expecting them to melt and disperse through the batter. They didn't, of course, resulting in the iconic treat enjoyed worldwide today. Then there are Tootsie Rolls, created by Leo Hirschfeld, named after his daughter's nickname. He was searching for a chocolate candy that wouldn't melt easily in the heat. His solution was to create a chewable form of chocolate candy, incorporating unused flavorings and other various ingredients available at the factory where he worked. A tinkering success story. And don't forget ganache. It reputedly originated from a mistake wherein a chocolatier's apprentice erroneously poured hot cream into some chocolate. Instead of a scolding, turns out they stumbled upon the rich, creamy filling we now lovingly spread, pipe, or dollop onto our favorite desserts. So you see, Simon, the confluence of error and ingenuity often sparks the birth of something extraordinary in the chocolate cosmos. Every spill, every mix-up could be the first step toward the next big thing in sugary delights. Who knows, maybe one of our listeners has the next cookie dough ice cream level invention sitting in their whoops file.
Who says mistakes are just mishaps? They're the secret ingredient in the recipe book of innovation. Now, who's up for turning a whoops into the next dessert craze?
Speaking of chocolate miracles, Simon, it's almost spiritual when you find the perfect companion for your cocoa, a good cup of joe. Now imagine elevating that to an ethereal level with espresso beans tailored for your truffles. Some say the right coffee and chocolate pairing is a heavenly experience, maybe even meditative. Ever had a moment like that where the combo made you feel transcendent?
Totally respect the coffee chocolate worship, Joe, but transcendence? I'd argue it's more about those taste bud fireworks than any cosmic journey. I mean, pair a rich espresso with a silky dark chocolate and boom, euphoria. But spiritual awakening? Not sold yet. It's sublime, sure, but that aha moment is probably just the caffeine talking. If we're talking soul stirring, my morning alarm comes pretty close. Now that's a daily resurrection if I've ever experienced one.
Haha, you're not wrong there. Waking up feels like a near-death experience sometimes. But I've got to say, Simon, never underestimate the power of a good bean. A perfectly roasted coffee can turn your whole day around. It might not be spiritual enlightenment, but it's as close as we'll get before noon.
Hey, new listeners, you've tuned in right at the peak of our ethereal espresso beans chat. We're having a laugh about finding that perfect coffee chocolate pair that can send your taste buds to cloud nine. Some folks think it's like a spiritual journey in every sip and nibble, while others, like me, reckon it's just top-notch sensory bliss. Either way, we're all in agreement. That combo is a slice of heaven on earth. Stick with us for more buzzworthy banter.
I'll tell you what, Simon, if I drank as much coffee as some of these folks claim to reach spiritual enlightenment, I'd be less Buddha and more jittery squirrel scrounging for acorns. Pair that with chocolate, and I'm orbiting Pluto. No spaceship needed.
Man, if enlightenment came in a cup, I'd be out there levitating over my lawn chair, handing out life advice with every sip. Imagine achieving inner peace, but every time you do, you gotta sprint to the John. That's less Buddha under the Bodhi tree and more Buddy. Can you spare 3 ply?
So, Simon, chasing that buzz, literally and metaphorically, do you think it's the flavor of the chocolate and coffee themselves causing that euphoria? Or is it just the caffeine giving us that boost, tricking our minds into thinking we found nirvana in a cup?
Just flavor being a ticket to nirvana? Nah, it's the caffeine kick, no doubt. Sure, the taste is like fireworks for the tongue, but that buzz? All caffeine's handiwork. It amps you up, makes your day, and sometimes, just maybe, it feels a little like enlightenment.
Well, I'll push back a bit on that, Simon. Flavor's got its own kind of power, man. Think about it. Savoring some killer dark chocolate or tasting beans from some remote mountain, it's an experience. It hits different. I'll grant you the caffeine's got the upper hand in the get up and go department, but don't count out the flavor. Sometimes it's all in the slow-mo joy of the taste, not just the rush.
You know, some folks really dive deep into this pairing thing, beyond just picking a dark roast for dark chocolate. There's a whole craft to it, like wine tasting. Take single origin coffee beans. They're from one place, so they've got unique flavors depending on where they grew, the soil, the climate, just like grapes in a vineyard. And with artisan chocolates getting fancy with stuff like sea salt or even exotic fruits, there's room for all these crazy, nuanced experiences that go way beyond your average mocha latte. Then there are those moments when you sit down with a cup of this perfectly brewed coffee and a piece of top-tier chocolate, and it's not about the buzz from caffeine, but rather taking in that journey of flavors unfolding together. It's a trip around the world without leaving your chair. And trust me, when you hit that sweet spot, pun intended, it's kind of a tiny miracle moment, as close to spiritual as munching gets.
It's a tiny miracle if you find the time to savor it, Simon. I mean, trip around the world, sure, but most folks are doing good to pause for the flavor of their morning brew, let alone meditate on the ethereal bliss of bean origins and craft chocolates. It's like some kind of aspirational taste Buddhism that very few really practice. Real talk, we buy the fancy stuff, but then we're gobbling and guzzling it while yelling at traffic or typing out emails. Maybe the spiritual awakening should be taking a minute to simply enjoy what we're consuming in the first place, right?
Man, Joe, you just hit the nail on the head. Full confession, half the time, my fancy morning espresso is chugged down while I'm fighting off a rogue sock that doesn't want to cooperate. We talk about these blissful matching experiences, yet we barely have time to enjoy them before diving into the daily grind. It really makes you think. Maybe we all do need that moment of zen, just appreciating what's in front of us, one sip, one bite at a time.
right? So, Simon, does that mean you're going to start setting aside time for a little coffee and chocolate meditation each morning? Or is rogue sock wrestling going to stay your primary AM activity?
Sorry, Joe. My mornings are a circus act, and there ain't no meditation ringmaster in sight. I'd love to be that enlightened dude, savoring his coffee like it's nectar from the gods while contemplating life's mysteries. But who am I kidding? Between snooze button marathons and my own personal sock puppet show, my ritual is less Zen garden and more bumper cars. So for now, it's grab and gulp over gourmet. But hey, you never know. One day I might just surprise you. And me.
Well, Simon, I hear you on the morning chaos. But who knows? Maybe there's a future episode where we do a live taste test, find our inner peace amongst the mayhem of those socks and snooze buttons. Until then, we'll keep searching for that blissful bite or sip in the madness. What are your thoughts, listeners? Ever found your moment of zen in a cuppa and a chocolate bar?
Definitely. Speaking of finding the divine in the everyday, have you ever considered how even our kitchen staples can carry a touch of the mystical? Why don't we dig into the wholesome world of herbs, like the legendary basil? This humble green has some deep roots stretching back to ancient times. It's been a symbol of love and protection across cultures. Kind of gives a whole new meaning to tossing some extra basil on your pasta, right?
Absolutely, Simon. I've always seen herbs as the underrated rock stars of the kitchen. But basil? It's got history. Not just for pesto or pizza. This leafy green was rocking it in ancient rituals, symbolizing love and even warding off evil in some cultures. Now we sprinkle it on food like a garnish without a second thought. Kinda wild how we've taken something sacred and made it as casual as seasoning chicken. But hey, maybe that's what makes every meal a little blessing, right?
I'll give you that. Basil's got history, Joe, but I don't know about it making every meal a blessing. If you ask me, the only thing holy in my kitchen is the cheese, and that's because it's full of holes. But hey, if slapping some basil on a tomato can ward off evil, then I've accidentally been performing exorcisms between two slices of bread all along. Who knew sandwich making could be so sacred? Maybe we should start respecting our spice racks more. They might just be mini altars we never recognized.
Simon, maybe we need to start a new religion. Our Lady of the Holy Grail cheese, patron saint of melted goodness and divine basil pesto. I can see it now, Sunday sermons with Parmesan blessings. But remember, my friend, in the Church of Cheese and Herbs, confession involves admitting how much garlic you actually use versus what the recipe calls for. Amen to that.
So, Joe, are we talking just a sprinkle of extra garlic, or are we steadfast believers that a recipe is merely a suggestion, and the true path to culinary enlightenment requires at least doubling the holy clove count?
Doubling, Simon? Rookie numbers, buddy. In the sanctuary of flavor, garlic is the gospel. A recipe's just a roadmap, real joy's found off the beaten path, where you quadruple that garlic. That's where taste buds get baptized in that fiery goodness. Forget suggestions, we're talking commandments. Thou shalt not skimp on the garlic. Live by it.
Ha ha, exactly, Joe. But back to the basil talk. Think about it. From holy herb to sprinkle on top, basil's journey mirrors our whole food culture. We've gone from treating these greens as sacred to shaking them onto pizza without a second glance. But when you realize each dish is like an echo of ancient traditions, maybe it gives us a reason to pause, take that first bite, and truly savor the connection to the past. It's not just food, it's history on a plate.
You're spot on, Simon. In addition to that connection with love and protection, basil was also sacred in some Hindu traditions, dedicated to Krishna and Vishnu, often planted around temples. The ancient Greeks associated it with mourning, yet others say it signified royalty. Over in Egypt, basil was possibly used in embalming and mummification processes. Imagine that. Our pizza topping might have been hanging out with pharaohs in the afterlife. It's like every sprinkle of basil is hinting at stories and rituals thousands of years old.
Hanging out with pharaohs, Joe? Let's not get carried away. Sure, basil had its moments in the ancient spotlight, but you won't see me bowing down to my spice rack tonight. Gotta say, though, it's kind of funny. Imagine if we treated all our ingredients like they were sacred. Bless this pepperoni, for it once danced in a ritual of flavor. It adds a spice of drama to dinner prep, doesn't it? But really, while the history is cool and all, at the end of the day, it's just tasty leaves that make our food pop. Nothing more mystical than that on my plate.
Yeah, Simon, there's definitely a chuckle-worthy side to treating our pantry like it's full of holy relics. But still, you've got to admit, embracing the history adds a bit of magic to your meal. That tangible link to the past can turn a mundane Monday dinner into something more enchanting. Yet at the end of the day, whether it's sacred or just delicious, if it brings joy to the table and makes that plate pop, then basil's serving its purpose. History lesson aside, enjoying good food is what really counts.
Absolutely, Joe. Basil's got layers, more than just flavor. It's wrapped up in history, mystery, and a sprinkle of the divine. Brings a whole new taste to the term soul food, doesn't it? Makes you wonder what other secrets are hiding in our herb garden.
You're onto something with the soul food idea, Simon. And speaking of souls and sprigs, thyme's another herb that's more than just a seasoning staple. It's been like a bridge between worlds. In ancient medicine, it was a go-to for healing. They even associated it with courage and bravery, medicinally and mythically potent. Plus, thyme had a rep for keeping nightmares at bay. Looks like our herb garden could be an armory against the things that go bump in the night.
That's wild, man. So you're telling me I could have been sleeping with a sprig of thyme under my pillow instead of checking the closet for monsters? All these years, I've had the secret weapon against the boogeyman right there next to the oregano. If only my spice rack knew about my childhood fears, we'd have teamed up sooner to turn those nightmares into dreamy, thyme-scented adventures.
Right? Next time, ditch the nightlight and go for the herb garden. Turns out your spice rack was the real dream catcher all along, Simon. Who needs folklore when you've got time?
So, Joe, get this. My grandma, she was the queen of quirky remedies. No joke. One night, as a kid, I had this streak of super bad dreams, right? Grandma marches into my room, wild twinkle in her eye, and whips out this dusty old book with all these herbs and their secrets. She hands me this little bag, stuffed it with thyme, mumbles something about ancient protection. Skeptical 8-year-old me thought, yeah, right. But after tucking that pouch under my pillow, boom, slept like a baby. The boogeyman didn't stand a chance. What can I say? Grandma's mojo was strong.
Well, Simon, sounds like Grandma was the herb whisperer. Maybe she knew something, because let's face it, the boogeyman is no match for Grandma's old-school magic. Thyme under your pillow is the original sleep button. Plus, I bet it added a lovely aroma to those drool-worthy dreams. Who needs high-tech alarm apps when you've got Grand's time-traveling pouch?
I hear you, Joe, but let's pump the brakes on Grand's herb mobile for a second. I bet some folks might raise an eyebrow at the whole thyme for courage thing. Maybe it's not so much magic as it is mindset, right? If you believe thyme's got your back, maybe that's all the bravery boost you need. It's like a placebo effect. You think it'll ward off nightmares, give you guts, and if that belief is strong enough, your brain just goes along for the ride. Mind over mattress, or in this case, mind over herb garden.
Mindset's king, Simon, no denying that. But here's the deal. Thyme's courage connection isn't just in our heads. Back in the day, Roman soldiers bathed in thyme before battle to amp up bravery. Medieval knights wore it for the same reason. Antiseptic properties meant thyme fended off more than just fears. It was practical, preventing infections. As for sleep, its carvacrol content influences brain activity, has a sedative effect. Not just lore, there's logic too. Belief merges with biology. So when you tuck into your thyme pouch, you're straddling ancient wisdom and modern science. Placebo or not, if you're getting all-star slumber, I'd say keep that herb garden close.
Whoa, Joe, time out on the history lesson. Let's not give thyme all the credit here. Those Roman soldiers probably bathed in a bunch of stuff. Doesn't mean we need to start marinating in McCormick's finest for a bravery boost. And knights? They had armor. I doubt they were relying on their herb sachets to save the day. Don't get me wrong, old-time uses are neat, and if science gives it a thumbs up for sleep, cool. But putting all your eggs in the thyme basket, let's sprinkle a bit of skepticism onto that ancient wisdom. There's a reason modern beds don't come with a built-in herb garden. You feel me?
Point taken, Simon. I'm not saying we ditch modern amenities for a bouquet of thyme as our night guard, but historical props where they're due. Thyme's been rocking the healing charts for centuries. Cut through the mystic haze, and you've got this. Thyme's antiviral qualities have real chops. Sure, don't shelf your Advil just yet, but tossing some thyme into your chicken soup? That's Mother Nature's little nudge pushing you past the sniffles. Electric blankets and memory foam are great, but a dash of nature's best is timeless, for body or brain. Always room for a bit of herbal homage in high-tech times.
So, Joe, if we're giving historical nods here, should we be crowning thyme as the king of the herb universe? It's done everything from seasoning soldiers to jazzing up jousts. But seriously, does it get the top spot in your Herb Hall of Fame, or is there another contender for the throne?
King of the herb universe? Thyme's resume is impressive, no doubt, but I've got to hand the crown to garlic instead. It's been warding off everything from vampires to infections for centuries. Allicin, the compound in garlic, is a health powerhouse. Lowering blood pressure, fighting bacteria, and packed with antioxidants, it's like the Swiss Army knife of the plant world. While thyme has its own throne in the realm of nighttime warriors and flavor saviors, garlic is your daytime champion against ailments. It might not be as sleep-friendly with that potent aroma, but when it comes to day-to-day defense, garlic takes the cake. Or, the garlic bread.
Garlic for the win during the day? Sure, it's a beast against the bad stuff. But let me tell you about garlic breath. Now that's the real daytime terror, Joe. Strolling into a meeting, breathing fire like a dragon isn't my idea of conquering anything but people's personal space. Thyme, though? It's got that subtle strength, like an undercover hero in your herb cabinet. Doesn't get in your face, just does its job quietly, adding depth to dishes and dreams without all that high-stakes, garlicky drama. A knight in shining armor, with a gentler touch. That's thyme for you.
A dragon breath deterrent, thyme? I'd argue that its subtle strength might not cut it in the high-octane world of flavor battling. Garlic's got the boldness to lead an army against blandness, plus the health benefits. Can you imagine chomping on thyme-roasted potatoes and getting that same wow factor? Nope. Consider this. Sometimes life needs a bit of garlicky drama. Thyme's stealthy, sure. It's like the special ops of seasoning. But every now and then, you want the culinary equivalent of fireworks. And let's face it, Simon, garlic is the herb that's not afraid to explode on your taste buds and make a statement.
Garlic's the bomb. I'll give you that. It's all about finding the right herb for the right time, right? Whether it's going stealth mode with thyme or front and center with garlic, they've both had a timeless impact. We could probably chat till the cows come home about which herb wears the crown, but what about those unsung heroes of the spice rack? They've got to have their own secret superpowers. What's lurking behind the parsley, Joe?
And talking about the spice rack's shadow dwellers, Simon, let's take the scenic route to Mintville. Mint's one of those unsung heroes you're talking about. It might be front and center in our mojitos, but it's got a backstory with more plot twists than a daytime soap opera. So here's a fun mint myth for you. Ever hear about how spearmint came to be? It starts with Pluto, the Greek god with a wandering eye, and a nymph named Mintha. Pluto's wife wasn't having any of it, so she, you guessed it, turns Mintha into a plant. And that's why every time you crush those mint leaves, you get a whiff of what could have been an Olympian scandal. And get this, some cultures even believed that carrying mint would ensure laughter. Might have made for some light-hearted pocket stuffing or light-hearted banquets back in the day.
Hold up, Joe. Spearmint spawned from a love triangle gone wrong? That's some spicy gossip from the herb world. If only plants could talk. Imagine mint dishing out dirt on the gods. Now there's a podcast idea for you. And who needs comedy shows when you can just stuff your pockets with mint and have a laugh fest wherever you go? Always knew my lonely sprig in a mojito had more of a story than just freshening my drink. You think people really walked around chuckling because they pocketed some peppermint? What an easy fix for a bad day. Forget happy pills. Grab a handful of mint.
Imagine the scene. Mint as the ancient world's go-to for a good time. But beyond plutonic love affairs and pocketed pick-me-ups, mint's got a resume that could overshadow any modern-day multi-hyphenate. Those chuckles might not have just been folklore, Simon. Mint contains menthol, which is a natural aromatic decongestant. Breathe easier, potentially feel better, and who doesn't crack a smile when they're feeling good? Plus, it has a long history of medicinal use, from aiding digestion to freshening breath. The Greeks loved to lounge on mint-scented furniture to stimulate their minds, adding an intellectual zing to their debates. And in ancient Rome, throwing a bit of mint into your mouth before speaking was fashionable. Think of it like the first chewing gum, preparing orators and politicians to speak clearly and confidently. So in a way, mint really was the precursor to ensuring both laughter and eloquence were just a leaf away.
Hang on a second, Joe. Mint-scented furniture? Talk about a literal take on fresh ideas during Greek debates. And I can just see those Roman politicians' minty fresh breath as their secret weapon for persuasion. Forget rehearsing. Just munch some leaves and you're the silver-tongued Speaker of the Senate. I wonder if anyone ever got caught in a mint leaf faux pas mid-speech. That'd be some historical hilarity right there.
For those just jumping in, Simon and I have been diving into the wild world of spearmint folklore. We've covered Pluto's mythological misadventures that sprouted spearmint from an act of divine vengeance. Plus, we've laughed about the belief that stuffing your pockets with mint could lead to non-stop giggles. Ancient times really nailed the herbal entertainment. We conjured up images of Greek intellects lounging on mint-infused sofas for a mental boost, and Roman rhetoricians popping mint leaves for that crisp oratory edge. Today, mints are mostly found in mojitos and gum, but who knew this unassuming leaf had such a storied, rambunctious past? From pocket-sized laugh inducers to the secret freshener for silver-tongued statesmen, it's mint's world, and we're just living in it.
Oh, for sure mint's got history, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Pocket-sized laugh inducers? If it were that easy, I'd have replaced my phone with a peppermint patch by now. And these furniture-sniffing Greeks, I'm picturing a toga party gone wild with philosopher types deeply inhaling their armchairs. All right, so mint freshens breath and jazzes up drinks, but let's dial down the mythology marketing. Ancient folks had some wacky ideas, no question, but I bet half the time they just liked the smell and made up stories to glam it up. I mean, next you'll be telling me spearmint could have been the crypto of ancient currency. Mint's cool, but as the epicenter of ancient lifestyle hacks, pass me a grain of salt, or should I say, a leaf of skepticism.
So if we strip down these wild myths and take them with that leaf of skepticism you're tossing, what's your take on why our ancestors were so big on infusing their lives with mint? Was it all about the aroma for them, or do you think there was something more to the herb hype in ancient times?
All right, Joe, here's a tangent for you. Back in college, I had this roommate. Let's call him Minty Mike. Mike was convinced that munching on mint could chill his nerves before exams. So there he was, every finals week, planting mounds of mint pots all over our dorm. Here's the kicker. He aced his tests. Now, was it the mint? Who knows? But it got so hyped up in our dorm that even I found myself snagging leaves off Mike's plants. Before long, we had this pseudo-science vibe going. We're talking about serious placebo territory. Whether it was the mint or just the belief in its magic powers, that stuff became our ancient Greek sofa, right in room 237. So what's my take? Our ancestors probably grabbed onto something simple that felt good and let their imaginations run wild, just like me and Minty Mike. It's human nature, dressing up the everyday to make life a little less ordinary.
Funny you brought up Minty Mike, Simon. Reminds me of my own brush with the mint magic mania. So there was this local cafe I frequented during my college days called The Minter. This place was all about mint. They believed it could do just about anything. Boost your brain, calm your nerves, even help you find love. They had a specialty drink, the Minter Elixir, a blend of green tea and various mints with a secret ingredient they never revealed. Students swore by it during finals. Whether it had true powers or not, that elixir was enchanting. Frankly, because we wanted to believe in something enchanting. I'd drink it every time I had a big test or a project deadline. Did it work? Hard to say. But every time I nailed a test or aced a presentation, the minter got some credit. It makes you wonder if it was the mint working its magic, the caffeine, or just the ritual giving us that little psychological edge. Whatever it was, mint became our talisman for success, much like our ancestors' mythical tales of mint. Perhaps making a myth is just part of human charm. We take our everyday experiences and embellish them into rituals that somehow bring comfort and confidence in the face of life's countless exams.
Guess what, Joe? Turns out the Minter Elixir and my dorm mint mayhem weren't too far off from an ancient Greek nightclub. We created our own modern myths, a shot of courage from a cup. Who needs a time machine when you've got a leafy legend that still sprinkles that old-school magic into the mundane? Mint, the myth, the mania, the unexpected mentor through life's little panics.
Leaping from mint to another realm of ancient wonder, Simon, let's unravel the saffron enigma. This crimson treasure has been worth its weight in gold historically, but is that price truly a reflection of its spiritual groove or just another marketplace illusion? I've seen them pluck each thread by hand, and it's like they're conducting a symphony in slow motion. It begs the question, are we paying for the spice or the soul poured into every strand?
Joe, Saffron's saga is wilder than a telenovela, pitting economics against the mystics since forever. So here's the deal. Each crocus flower gifts us just 3 saffron threads, and it takes about 75,000 blossoms to cook up a single pound of spice. We're talking massive labor for teeny yield. Economically? Sure, that rarity inflates value, but check this. Saffron's tied deep into history's spiritual fabric, too. Cultures once draped it over deities, dyed robes for royal teasers, and its scent, believed to waft you closer to the heavens. Drop saffron in your paella, and bam, you're munching on millennia of legacy and a sprinkle of devotion. Labor of love, or cash cow, the line's blurrier than my vision after a Netflix binge. It's not just scooping a pricey pinch onto your plate, we're savoring a swirl of sacrifice with those spirituality-soaked strands.
All right, Simon, let's stir the pot a bit here. You're steeped in the sacred saffron narrative, thousands of flowers for a single pound and all that spiritual jazz. But break it down, and is saffron's mystique not just masterful marketing from days of yore? Its golden hue could dye fabric fit for kings, true, but then what's royalty aside from the ancient world's version of celebrities endorsing sneakers? Saffron might evoke the divine for some, yet when you strip away its historical sheen, are we left digesting hype over taste? After all, culinary trends come and go. It makes me ponder if the reverence placed upon saffron still holds a flame, or have we just gotten hooked on the narrative, snacking on stories about spirituality with every saucy spoonful?
So, Joe, this one summer, I'm backpacking across Spain, right? And I end up volunteering on this old-timey farm. They've got rows of crocus flowers for saffron stretching like an endless crimson carpet. Every morning we're there, plucking each thread by hand. One evening, the farmer whips up this massive paella, says it's his grandmother's recipe, and he's got this reverence in his eyes as he sprinkles the saffron, each grain a token of labor and legacy. Now, did that dish carry a celestial taste? Hard to say. But sharing stories over that golden meal under the stars, I felt something. Was it the spice or the farmer's tale weaving some kind of magic into our feast? I guess sometimes flavor is more than just taste. It's about the people, places, and passion between those sunset-hued threads. That experience stuck with me, the value in that moment beyond what any price tag could capture, I reckon.
Fascinating twist, Simon. So you tasted saffron steeped in tradition, straight from the soil to the skillet. We often forget how flavors carry fragments of personal stories and collective history. Now they say victory tastes sweet, but maybe, just maybe, triumph tastes like saffron, tinged with sweat, soil, and stardust.
Now wait a minute, Joe. Let's consider the skeptic's lounge here. Stardust-sprinkled saffron sounds dreamy, but isn't victory about crossing the finish line rather than the shininess of the trophy? Maybe we've glorified this spice to star status without questioning why. Those spiritual and soulful vibes are great, but at the end of the day, it's just a plant part we're eating, not enlightenment in a dish. It's valid to question if we're overhyping saffron. Sure, traditions are warm fuzzies, but they can distract us from practicality. You wouldn't pay for an overpriced car just because its ad was snazzy, right? Just like that, should we really idolize a flavor just because it's rare or has a seasoned saga? Sometimes taste needs to stand on its own, unseasoned by tales. Maybe true victory is savoring simplicity without the pomp and narratives.
Simon, you hit where it hurts, the beauty in the bare bones of existence. We gaze at saffron and see a halo, yet strip away the angelic choir and it's just threads plucked from petals. Sure, the effort matters, but does it justify the lofty legends? Think about those moments cutting through the noise, tasting something for what it really is, pure, simple. I get that rush of clarity thinking about it. Could be we've been dining on dazzling tales more than bold flavors. Maybe the next scoop of saffron shouldn't summon deities or dollars, but rather stir us back to simplicity, where the true essence of its taste takes center stage. Now that's a victory lap worth running, a race back to unadorned, honest flavor.
Look, Joe, calling out the saffron saga doesn't mean we toss it with yesterday's leftovers. But let's ground ourselves for a sec. Rarity and labor jacking up prices? That's Economics 101 in action. No mystery there. And weaving stories so grand they'd make Tolkien blink. Isn't that just human nature showing off its storytelling swagger? We all love a bit of mystique in our mealtimes. Maybe the saffron-scented plot twists aren't just about dazzling us into dishing out dollars. They serve up a little reminder that even in our Wi-Fi wired world, some things still need a real human touch. Saffron's pulling us back to an earthy reality where not everything gets fast-tracked. So here's the rub. It's not so much about snacking on the story, but savoring the savory sweat and soul stitched into those crimson threads. Maybe a dash of simplicity serves up the honesty, but too plain, and what are we left with? Just another ingredient in the spice rack, waiting for its backstory to be told.
You know, Simon, I'm willing to wager that if saffron lost all its stories tomorrow and we judged it solely on taste, there'd be a new underdog spice waiting in the wings, ready to take up the mantle of most mystifying. It's the cycle of culinary celebrity. One day you're just another plant. Next, you're the guest of honor at the dinner party of legends.
Joe, this reminds me of a time when I stumbled upon this hole-in-the-wall spice shop in Morocco. Tucked between buzzing market stalls was this tiny haven, stacked floor to ceiling with jars of spices. The air, thick with earthy scents, grabbed you by the nostrils as soon as you walked in. The owner, this seasoned fella, with hands stained by turmeric and cumin, told me tales of every herb and spice like they were his kin. One jar caught my eye, a modest, unassuming thing labeled Desert Rose. He saw me glance and chuckled, said it's mostly overlooked for flashier spices. Then he brewed me some tea infused with it, a taste subtle but somehow singing. No grand tales or legendary uses, just a sprinkle of the desert's quiet essence. That desert rose had no myths to lean on, yet it left a mark on my palate stronger than any storied saffron could have dreamt of. Sometimes, Joe, it's those unsung heroes of the spice rack that hit the right notes, not because they're swathed in stories, but because their simplicity is the story, making their own rhythm without the need for ancient backup singers.
Stick around, folks, because we're about to dive into the unsung heroes of the culinary world. Forget the fame. Let's uncover those clandestine flavors that are quietly, yet confidently, jazzing up dishes without any need for a spotlight. Who knows? We might just find the next big thing in a pinch of the overlooked.
Joe, here's the thing. We champion these underdog spices, pushing for a cuisine without the bells and whistles of rarity and tradition. Yet, isn't part of saffron's charm precisely in its complexity? Not just flavor, but the heritage, the human stories harvested alongside those crimson strands. If we strip away all that, turning our backs on what makes each spice special beyond taste, maybe we'd lose some culinary magic. That almost spiritual connection to our history through food, how it ties us to places, times, and people, we risk letting that slip through our forks if we only chase the new and unnoticed. Those narratives add depth to our dining, and saffron's tale is as rich as the flavor itself. There's value in keeping traditions alive, maintaining that thread that links past to plate.
And Simon, just before we wrap up here, you're absolutely right. Every spice, from the humble to the holy grail like saffron, has its place at the table of tradition and taste. Thanks, folks, for tuning in to today's flavorful journey on Infinite Podcast. You've gotten a real taste of spice lore and more with us, and tomorrow's episode is shaping up to be just as savory. Make sure you're back here at 5 p.m. Eastern to dive in again. Keep sprinkling that unique zest into your days until then.